What's up? 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 Greetings. This is soragenerationnext from the blog Generation Next. I know it's been months. Don't chew me out, but I've actually been busy on a huge Bratz project. It has not only turned out time-consuming, but very expensive. And during these times, your girl's pockets be squoze. So if you go to the website, the project that I'm working on, which is at bratzpack.fandom.com, you may not see many changes, but that's because the work is being done behind the scenes before I even tackle the page. But not to fear, I've been getting comments from enthusiastic volunteers who want to help. Don't think I did notice. I know I've been busy and I haven't got back to everybody. But thank you for all the support. I'm just getting the format down and starting each page's design. Once that's complete, it'll be open to the public. So just read the first page's rules and y'all will be squared to go. In the meantime, please check out the page Looking Bratz. It is filled with Bratz items, collections, a cinema, and more, and all the most up-to-date information. Keeping the Bratz information around is so important to me too, so I will always support a website who does this. This is not a paid sponsorship. I just love this website, okay? For now, I will be back to making Bratz videos because 2021 is the Bratz Pack's 20th anniversary. I want to create more Bratz content to promote them and provide y'all with more info and news. But y'all ain't here for that, are you? Y'all are here to find out what I think is the worst to best Bratz movie. Warning, the following list may trigger you, and there may be some spoilers. Also, this may be a lengthy video, so viewer discretion is advised. I would like to tell y'all that this video is actually a collection of reviews that I put together into one. So there will be timestamps in the description box in case y'all want to be timestamped, and timestamps in the comment sections that I will pin, so y'all can skip to what I think about each of these movies, and I put them in order of what I think is the worst to best. So anyway, I consider myself somewhat of a Bratz fan outsider when it comes to these movies and in the TV show. So let me just give you some of y'all history on me and my relationship with Bratz. I've been into Bratz since 2000. Yes, 2000, when the website was first under construction. Okay, before they were even released. I was the tween that begged Bratz to come out with movies like I was seeing their competitors do. So by the time the first Bratz movie arrived, I was probably older than most of the kids really into the Bratz. I was 14 years old. So I had a really clear view and memory of all of the movies. Now, I've only watched each movie once, and that was the year they were released. Afterwards, I never watched any of them again until recently when I started this fandom page. So, the following review will contain my first impression of the movies as well as my current impression. Let me just warn you all, because I was older than everyone else. Some of the Bratz movies, they don't carry the same nostalgia for me as it does for others, okay? And this is not to say I don't enjoy all of the Bratz movies. I still enjoy them all, even for their bad and good points. I can watch the worst movies and enjoy them. You know, I also don't really care about plot holes or inconsistencies or whatnot. I don't expect movies based on dolls to be perfect, and I have to expect movies based on adults to be perfect. But it helps, okay? It will admit, it helps. My only requirement is that the movie really brings to life the Bratz universe. What I think a lot of people don't realize about the Bratz movies and the Bratz series is that the movies in the series were made to promote the dolls, not the other way around. Bratz are like Barbie in that way. Barbie's movies were made to promote the doll. Therefore, the series and movies are really never going to be stagnant or solidly canon, and they're not going to be the heart of the brand. Winx and Disney Princess dolls are the opposite. They're designed to promote the movies and shows, and that makes a difference as to what is considered a canon universe and what isn't. My analysis of the movie will be based on the heart of Bratz, which is the doll universe, and how well the movies adapt that universe in a full-length story. Now, y'all might think I'm petty. I think I told y'all before in my other videos that I'm a petty fan, so I'm gonna be super petty with this list, okay? With that being said, let's get into it. I will be reviewing each movie's story, characters, visuals, and music. I will be discussing how accurate I felt it was to the Bratz universe, how each movie was constructed, and overall how much I enjoyed it. So now that's why y'all know why this is lengthy, because I had to break it down. I also want to let y'all know I won't be including the interactive DVDs, the Passion for Fashion DVD game, or the DVDs that only contain TV series episodes like Good Vibes and BFF. Bratz Go to Paris is an exception, and I will explain why later. So this is worst to best feature films released as full-length movies. I wrestled with myself as to whether I should start with the worst film or the best. After much consideration, a coin toss, eeny, meeny, miny, mo, and some discussion about how people view these type videos, I decided to start with worst to best. I know I'm going to be eaten alive because that always happens when you start negative. But here goes. Coming in last place is Bratz Rock Angelz. I've watched these kind of videos and read articles about the best and worst Bratz movies, and time and again, this movie always seems to come at the top of everybody's list. Everyone is entitled to their opinion, but I can definitely admit that it causes me some confusion. Everyone has their own nostalgia, and if that's why they enjoy it, it's cool. But your girl be confused, because last I remembered, this movie was not that good. Okay, yes, all the other movies had some elements from this movie, but I think by the time those movies came out, things had been cleaned up a little, and I had gotten used to this universe. But from first impression, Rock Angelz wasn't it for me. And if I take off the nostalgia glasses and think back to how I really felt about this movie in 2005, it wasn't good. I watched this movie for the first time in 2005 when I was 15 years old, and have to admit I haven't watched it since until recently last week. So it's been 15 years, my old friend. But I remembered there was a reason I didn't return to this movie, and why it soured my interest in the overall Bratz TV series. And I know y'all gonna come over here talking about some, I love this series, it's my childhood. That thing ruined my childhood. Okay? Let's start with the Rock Angelz story. Written by Peggy Nichol, the same initial writer and overseer of the Bratz TV series, the story centers on Chloe, Sasha, Yasmin, and Jade, with appearances by Cameron, Eden, and Dylan. Jade gets a job working for fashion editor Berdine at Your Thing magazine with her bumbling, dim-witted, blonde interns, the Tweevils, Casey and Kirsty. Berdine is the Barbie of the universe and is like Miranda Priestley from The Devil Wears Prada, except louder and more obnoxious. She's impossible and fires Jade. The Bratz decide to start their own magazine called Bratz Magazine, obviously to promote the real Bratz magazine that had been released at the time. They steal tickets from Your Thing, fly off to London to cover two big scoops, the opening of Pins and the, I think, is it Save the World benefit concert or Change the World? I don't know. They said two different ones in the movie. They get into some drama along the way, like Chloe meeting a prince who turns out to be bougie, Sasha taking over a segment meant to be for her and Jade, and Yasmin finding the dog of a reality show judge named Byron Powell, Simon Cowell of this universe, which breaks them all apart for a minute. And then finally, after making up in time to cover the opening of Club Pins, they head to the benefit concert, but their tickets are stolen by the Tweevils, Berdine's interns, and minions, so they have to sneak in. After that, they meet up with Byron, who introduces them to Roxy, who just broke up with her band Crash. After this, they all form a band and continue the show, making their debut as Bratz Rock Angelz. Did y'all catch up with that? Okay, yeah. So people come to me talking about how empowering the movie was because the lead characters overcame the white blonde upper class woman abusing her power to create their own diverse magazine. You know, people are like, they're entrepreneurs at a young age, influencing the fashion scene at just 16 and whatnot, and that's inspiring young girls to chart their own, destinies, especially in the fashion industry, which is largely predominantly dominated by men. Okay, and it feels very true to the actual Bratz doll story. You know, with them struggling against a Berdine of their own in the real doll industry during the doll wars. So with that in mind, I can agree with people that that is the charm of this story. You know, Mattel has done a lot to try and stop the Bratz's influence back then, and I believe they were already in a lawsuit with MGA at that time over My Scene, which was the reason for the doll wars, actually. And it's also just a fun and funny movie too, you know, aside from it kind of mimicking the Bratz life. It's kind of fun and funny, and I found myself chuckling at it. You know, it was some really funny moments. So I get it, you know, I get it. But if I look at the story itself without thinking about the message the movie was trying to send, it was literally all over the place. Let me just tell you all my first impression. First off, when I was 15, before this movie came out, I had already received the Bratz Rock Angelz album and doll, which had been released months before. I was heavily invested in the Bratz World Yahoo group community, which was the biggest at the time and still is across other platforms. The album was so good. It had so many good things. I would listen to that album over and over and over and have memorized all the songs. So this is what I was expecting, okay? A story about them learning not to let fame get to their heads. Sasha's All About You. A story about someone or all of them not being a good friend. Chloe's You Think. A romance story between Roxy and someone else who is not any of her friends, whose hair is a mess, and who is weird. I'll do a further breakdown of this mystery lover in a couples video I'm formulating, but for now, that's what I expected in this movie. I expected Yasmin to be in a relationship with someone who was trying to own her, almost a relationship that's semi-abusive. I expected there to be some drama. Now, at this time, My Scene was out. My sister became a huge fan of My Scene. I felt threatened by My Scene as a teenager. I was like, they're copies of the Bratz. They're trying to take the Bratz fandom and confuse people out of buying Bratz products. I just felt threatened by them because I didn't want the Bratz to lose money and not be sold anymore. Apparently MGA felt the same because they filed a lawsuit in 2004. Okay, they felt they were cutting into the Bratz market, and there we go. That was all she wrote. But my sister loved them, and she would watch all their webisodes and movies, and they had media content a good 3 years before Bratz. And I was quite jealous of that. I was like, you know, Bratz been out a while, and yet My Scene is capturing interest with their webisodes and movies. At the time Rock Angelz came out, My Scene had come out with Jammin' in Jamaica. To me, my teen self, it was a good movie. It had the slice of life that was popular then, the teen drama, and a good story. It brought all of the dolls to life, including Special Edition J, and actually had every outfit in the movie, including all the boys. The Bratz's first movie tried to do that, but I guess too many people felt it may have been lower quality. Also, the Bratz movie didn't relate to Europeans as much as like their later TV series and later movies, where Bratz was at its height, and may have even felt more like a copy of My Scene. I don't know. I didn't think about it that way back then, but I was hoping after hearing the Rock Angelz album, we would finally get content that had the drama and suspense and slice of life that rival brand My Scene had. So imagine my disappointment when Rock Angelz came out. The movie had very little connection to the soundtrack. Maybe you could pull some things out of it, but it was written without the soundtrack in mind. So I'm like, what was the point of that whole album then? Why tease us? It wasn't until later that I realized that the album actually captures unseen events that happened after the movie. But that just makes things worse. Aside from the movie being nothing like the promotional soundtrack, it itself was a mess. It felt like the movie was trying to tell too many stories at once. First, they were trying to start a magazine. Then, they also shoved in a Pretty in Punk World Destination storyline of them in London. And finally, they didn't even become Rock Angelz until the very end of the movie. Crickets, please. This is called Bratz Rock Angelz, isn't it? Yet the movie was not really about them being Rock Angels, rock stars. The movie was mostly about Bratz magazine and their trip to London. It should have been called Bratz Magazine or Bratz Go to London, not Bratz Rock Angels. It could have even been called Bratz Pretty and Plump, because that was the world destination line where they went to London. So they shoved in the rockstar thing at the very end, which made everything feel rushed and random. It tried to be too many things at once. Because of them shoving in Rock Angels at the end, I was disappointed that Roxy only showed up in a few scenes. Here I am with all 5 of my dolls, finally going to see another Bratz Pack member on the screen, and she only get her 5 seconds of fame? Like, and nothing? I was hoping for a real Rock Angels movie, one that brought the doll universe to life. I was hoping for a real story about becoming a rock star, the ups and downs of fame, on the road drama, touring, living the rock star life. Later, they used some of these themes, but not in a rock star scenario. And this was the movie that should have been about it. They still could have inculcated the magazine in London, but possibly trying to write how it feels to be a real rock star, with London being one of their tour spots. Instead, the focus was everywhere but on Rock Angels. From the moment the Bratz decided to start a magazine, it was rushed. First off, I don't care what connection Sasha has. Who just sells an office space to teenagers? And I don't care how nicely they're able to decorate it. Who's paying to keep the lights on? Like, was there a fundraiser in between to raise money for this space? Who's paying the bills? Where are their parents? I was hoping this movie would go a step further than the other doll movies of the time and actually introduce parents or the Bratz characters' backgrounds. All we saw was a mention of Chloe's mom calling over and over about Chloe wearing rubber boots. Like, who agreed to let the Bratz fly off to London and start their own magazine even while in school? How are they able to fly to London using Berdine's passes and tickets? Did their parents not question how they got this opportunity? And first off, Berdine only would have 3 passes and tickets, since there's only her and her interns, the Tweebles, which means one of the Bratz would have been left behind. Whose parents decided to pay? How did Dylan and Cameron convince their parents to let them go? All of these questions in between could have made for an interesting story. Instead, they rushed the building of the magazine like they did everything else in a montage, as if it happens overnight, so they could get the girls to London and get them into rockstar mode. We never saw the struggle. We never saw the obstacles. We really didn't see anything. Okay? Ultimately, I respected Berdine more, because I'm sure she went through way more to start up her company, and she did it all by herself. I didn't see them struggling, so to me, I didn't feel the hard work was rewarded. At this time, I compared it to the competitor My Scene, of course. Jammin' in Jamaica, which had come out the year before and was the first full-length My Scene movie, had them traveling to a destination. And yes, it may seem unachievable to most of us and may have had its plot holes, but at least they showed the My Scene convincing a parental figure to let them go. At least they had one clear purpose as to why they were going. It made sense who was paying for it, and they were pretty limited to one part of the island according to their budget. Furthermore, at least it focused on adventures in Jamaica. And I know Bratz ain't My Scene, okay? But My Scene storytelling appeared superior at this time, especially to a teenager aged 15. Now, I have my criticisms about that movie too, but this is about the Bratz. Basically, the Bratz movie seemed a little less realistic and definitely more childish in comparison to their competitor. And I expected Bratz to cut throats, annihilate their competition. I expected them to snatch edges and give me ugly crying. Most of the time, I found myself wincing and rolling my eyes. The only struggle they endured was when they actually had to find topics for their magazine. And while yes, that's a portion of it, that shouldn't have been everything. First off, there should have been some airport drama, like there is in real life when you fly from a foreign country. How could the girls even afford to tour London? Like, again, who paid for what? How are they able to exchange money? Even in passing, this could have been mentioned. Just because a movie is made for kids doesn't mean it has to be dumb. I was 15 asking these questions, and I had little experience with traveling outside of the country. However, my family did always travel and encourage traveling. So even, I knew this movie glossed over a lot of things that could have made it a good story had the focus been more narrow. Overall, I would have liked 3 separate movies or TV show episodes for the start of the magazine, the trip to London, and possibly a 3-parter, and a whole separate movie about them actually being rock stars. But all together, it was a big sloppy mess. I'ma just keep it real. Most dolls movies are released to tell us what the line they're trying to promote means. I don't know what they were trying to promote here. It seems like they were trying to promote Bratz Magazine, Pretty and Punk, and Rock Angelz all at the same time, which means the title is false promotion. This movie also had problems with how they were interpreting the characters. Now, the one thing I hated about Starrin and Stylin was how they changed the characters, especially in relation to how they were perceived online before that movie, Starrin and Stylin, and Charles O'Connor's vision took effect. I was most upset that they made Sasha the stereotypical mad black woman, and they stripped Jade of all of her interests in extreme sports, her quick mind and quick wit, and made her a one-dimensional character interested in fashion. I mean, aren't they all interested in fashion? To me, that gave her less dimension than all the other characters. What's worse about Rock Angelz is they actually gave all of Jade's cool qualities, you know, her interest in extreme sports, to the blonde, white Chloe. Unfortunately, it seemed like Chloe was the character with the most dimension. She could now be girly, into fashion that's shimmery and sparkly with animal prints, but also like sports and drama, etc. I believe they gave her these sporty qualities to compete with Mycene's Delancey, who got the Avril Lavigne treatment. Avril Lavigne was super popular because she gave another image to blondes besides the Britney Spears, Clueless Cher, and Legally Blonde Elle Woods tropes. So I believe they tried to make Chloe that Avril Lavigne. But seeing as it never suited her character, it was just another random piece of the Bratz Rock Angelz movie that just seemed thrown in there. And it hurt Jade as a character. Jade was supposed to be way extreme and totally far out, not just in appearance but in attitude in life. This is what the Bratz 2015 online stop motion webisodes got right. Now y'all can come at me about that, because I know 2015 had them sweeter dolls, but at least they got that right. And since most people didn't remember who Jade was in 2001, and the books never captured this piece of her character, no one but me cared. At least in later movies, they made Jade into a brainiac, you know, interested in science and stuff. But it would have been less stereotypical, with her being Asian, had they maintained her sporty side, like she once had. Granted, you know, to just right now, it doesn't mean that they got to strip Chloe of her sporty side. You know, Jade can also be into sports, just like Chloe is. Okay, there's nothing wrong with more than one character being interested in sports. I'm not saying that Chloe has to now be dumbed down to a stereotypical character, but don't strip that from Jade either, just because you want to make Chloe into Avril Lavigne. Okay, Jade deserves to be the character she was in 01. She deserves to have dimension, and I feel like Bratz Rock Angelz stripped Jade of her dimension, of her various passions besides fashion. Okay. Now, granted, Carter Bryant did have some different ideas for the characters before release, and Chloe was supposed to be the queen of cool, which is almost like, you know, Cool Cat, but she was still largely girly. She didn't deserve to have more dimension, you know, than all the other characters, you know, but this is what happens when there's not enough people of color around to help with the storytelling. I'm just saying. And even though the people of color were working in Bratz, the Bratz company, that doesn't mean the production company largely had people of color. So obviously they catered more to Chloe. Okay. Now Sasha maintained her mad black woman attitude, and I don't have a problem with it, but it seems like they struggled to give Sasha layers. Like, she was just selfish and hard, not compassionate or caring in any way. I hated that about her because it just wasn't me, and yet she was the only one technically representing black girls. It made her less likable, and it's hard enough to sell black characters as dolls. I remember the polls back then were brutal against Sasha. She was always voted last as people's favorite. Always. I think I posted one of those polls in one of my other videos called Bratz 2018 Please Don't. Anyway, they didn't hand the same dimension to Sasha, you know, that they did like to Yasmin or Chloe. But at least they gave her interest outside of fashion, unlike with Jade. Like, seriously? Yasmin, the MGA darling, of course, got all the sweet and lovable qualities, even if she wasn't the focus of the movie. You know, and that's another thing I hated about the movie. This was supposed to be told from Jade's perspective. And when you read all the books based on this movie, it's as told by Jade. But Chloe is primarily the narrator in the movie. And the official Rock Angelz movie website back then, which has since been taken down, labeled Chloe the main character and main narrator of the movie. I got good memory. You all might have thought you took that down, but I remember what I saw. Okay? Overall, this should not have been the case. If you're gonna make fun of Barbie, don't do the same thing she did and make the blonde white the central character. It ain't right. Now let's talk about these boys. They were probably the worst adaptation of everyone. First off, the only boys who made an appearance were Ethan, Cameron, and Dylan. Cameron and Ethan might as well have been the same dude because they didn't give them much difference from each other throughout the movie or TV show. And they even often did the other's job when the other wasn't around, like taking photos of the girls or doing photo shoots or filming. There was no mention of Kobe and Kate. In the book based off of it, they stated they were studying abroad. But then that same book said Yasmin was the new girl who just moved there the year before. Which would definitely not make sense in the Bratz universe if Bratz Babyz and Bratz Kidz were to exist. That was a problem they brought over from Starrin and Stylin. But at least in the actual Rock Angelz movie, no one could tell when she arrived to meet her friends because it was never mentioned. So, guess it's just might be separate from the book, okay? Anyway, back to the boys. The boys that did show up were nothing like they were initially interpreted, and I do blame the movie that was released before this. Cameron was called the Blaze, not just by Chloe, but by all the Bratz girls, and this was because they all thought he was hot. Therefore, in my pansexual polyamorous mind, I believe all of them had a crush on Cameron. Period. Okay? In the Rock Angelz movie, they made Cameron a lame. Okay? There was no indication that the girls thought he was hot. Even Chloe referred to him as cute, but hard to figure out. She didn't seem to think he was hot. She just knew him for years and got used to him, basically, as a childhood friend. And to be honest, I can't even take that seriously, because she claims she's known Cameron since the 2nd grade, but then what's Bratz Babyz the movie then? And really, what about the whole Bratz Babyz and Bratz Kidz universe released the year before? I mean, we can argue that just because there were dolls, you know, doesn't mean they knew each other, but it still did take me aback a bit, considering the circumstances of the lines. Like, okay, so if you just met Cameron in the 2nd grade, how he have a Bratz Babyz doll? how is he in Bratz Babyz the movie? Like, I especially argued that later down the line, because Bratz Babyz the movie came out afterwards. But it's just like Bratz Babyz the line had been out. So technically, all of them have known Cameron since they were 3 years old, really. So Chloe was not the only childhood friend here. Thankfully, the doll universe ignored this couple, you know, placing Chloe with Kobe, Kate, and other boys. And thankfully, the series gave Cameron other love interests throughout the Bratz universe, like Roxy and Sasha. The whole Nigel is a jerk and I'm supposed to be with Cameron didn't fly with me. Sure, it does teach girls to be realistic about their choices in love and not to fall for the first handsome prince they meet. But if she really liked Cameron, she never would have let Nigel influence her like that in the first place. They made Cameron the hopeless romantic, pining after a girl that clearly is showing little interest in him. I felt that Cameron was getting played by Chloe left and right throughout the movie and the TV series. She would only use him when she didn't have nobody, but had no qualms with flirting with other boys or dating them either. Had the nerve to get mad jealous when Cameron dated other people after her. And they would just make him a simp. I don't know if I can even say that, but that's what they would do. Okay? I felt like he was being used by Chloe. I'm sorry. And I missed when he was the Blaze, single and ready to mingle, just like all the other Bratz Pack members before they gave him the Ken doll treatment. But fans began shipping this couple, so it stuck, unfortunately. Okay? Anyway, let's continue talking about how the movie failed to even adapt the boys' nicknames and personalities. Dylan was named the Fox because the girls considered him slick. Instead, in the movie, they made him a complete cornball who thought he was slick.
Okay, I was hoping he'd have the Slick Nick personality, you know, like in Zootopia, Slick Nick, you know, the fox. Instead, they made him a cornball. And while Dylan's comic relief probably saved this show, he was no longer the cool character I imagined him to be. Just because they're boy dolls in the girls' world doesn't mean they have to be created to be stupid. Okay? Eaton was supposed to be a non-stop hotshot. He's supposed to be the dragon, the one given the VIP treatment. He is possibly the character meant to be conceited in the Bratz girls' opinion. But none of the movies, not the books, nothing ever interpreted him based on his nickname or initially developed personality. In fact, they don't even mention their nicknames, and probably because the writers didn't even care to get the characters right. I mean, come on. They had Yasmin calling Chloe Cool Cat in this movie. Unless she has eyes on the side of her head, she was talking to Chloe. Definitely a problem in the writing. They weren't fooling me. I know who is who. Normally, I'm more forgiving with visual error, as it's not easy or cheap to capture things visually. But I draw the line at script errors. That's as obvious as in this movie. Okay? At least get the characters right. That's who you represent. It's like a mom decided to write a story about a bunch of dolls and just skimmed over the Bratz line before writing the story. Okay? Like, oh, you know, my daughters, they love the Bratz dolls. And I grew up with Barbie. So just give me the dolls and I'll write me a story around it. Ooh, I read a story about, you know, how girls shouldn't fall for the first prince. You know, I think that's a good message for girls. Didn't even think about the Bratz, okay? And to me, there's no heart in that. There's no heart. The details weren't taken into account. They must have really thought kids were that stupid. Well, since everyone liked the movie, I guess kids really didn't care about the details. And I was just too old to be watching it. maybe that's the case, okay? But because they didn't care, most people watching the series didn't even know truly who the Bratz boys were. And they didn't even know Cameron or Eaton had nicknames. And when Cameron was re-released in 2018 as The Blaze, I saw in the comment section, people were responding like, who's the Blaze? I was like, what? Who's the Blaze? I don't remember anybody in the series called The Blaze. Nor you had people over here talking about who's the Blaze. Okay? But everyone wants to tell me this was the best Bratz movie and that the series that followed was iconic? Okay. Y'all feel what you feel. I don't co-sign. So let's go back to the Bratz boys for a moment. Let's just talk about Cameron's look. Okay? I will talk about his look too. First off, they switched out his oily surfer boy hair with Dylan's curly hair and whitewashed Dylan by giving him the oily, wet surfer boy hairdo. Knowing no black boys look like that. Okay? Word. This caused confusion later on when trying to adapt him live. We all know Dylan was black, at least biracial, at the very least. And they seem to be doing their best to wash out his blackness. They seem to be doing their best to wash out Eaton's Asian heritage as well, as his hair was far shades lighter than it was supposed to be. He hadn't worn one outfit from his collection, so I had to admit I was confused as to who he was until the Bratz girl said his name was Eaton. So they funked up the boys, okay? They fucked them up bad. And what's worse is that Eaton didn't even go to London with the Bratz. He didn't even go to London. Oh my god. In the actual Bratz Rock Angelz line, Eaton was the only boy that made an appearance. And yet he was the only boy not present with them in London. He was even in the Pretty and Punk World Destination London line too. He should have been in London with the other Bratz Pack members. Sasha wasn't even in that line. She should not have been in London, unfortunately. Even if they had intended to make a Sasha for the line. It made me mad enough they didn't make a punk Sasha, let alone stick her in London after that. Making me want punk Sasha even more. They didn't even add in my favorite queer girl, Megan, either. Who's considered Rock Angel's #1 fan. More on why I think she's the real queer lover than ever. The real queer queen. And not Roxy later. I'm going to talk about that in my couples video. But anyway, Megan should have been in it. I know that doll was only released in select locations as a special edition, and maybe even released after the Rock Angelz concept was complete, but still, I would have liked to see her anyway. It seems like the movies love to omit Megan out of everything, but she was one of the original Bratz characters. And there's no excuses, because she was actually in the Pretty and Punk line too, the World Destination London line. So no excuses. She should have been in London with her friends. If you're going to shove in that portion of the story, actually add the characters that belong there. And finally, Roxy. I was so looking forward to Roxy. She was the cool rock star, Spice, and the newest character to be interpreted. You know, she was really the Avril Lavigne of this whole output, okay? But she was literally only in a few minutes at the end of the movie, okay? She got her 5 seconds of fame, and it was over. And I was looking forward to more development from her, and they didn't deliver. First off, even making her the new girl was weird, because Roxy had been released in 2004, a year before the release of Rock Angelz. You know, most doll brands tie in new characters into the movies if they want to weave in a new girl in the story. They released them to tie directly into the movie. Roxy wasn't the new girl in the Bratz universe, so it was weird for the Bratz not to know her by the time the movie came out. It was made weirder when they made a Bratz Babyz for Roxy and Phoebe, and her twin sister appeared in the Bratz Kidz line. The commercials and art showed them interacting with everybody at a very young age, so how is she new? Also, as an identical twin myself, it was also disappointing not to see her sister Phoebe around. I mean, what girl has the premiere of the century and her twin sister isn't around to see it? I would never let that happen. I would make sure my twin is there. She would make sure she's there. And with Phoebe being the sweet one who's always supportive and giving advice, she'd have definitely been there. Granted, all of the Bratz families were screwed up in the movie, in the series. So hey, for all I know, Roxy wasn't even a twin in this movie. Like, they probably didn't even care to make her a twin. You know, Roxy got the least amount of development in this movie. So I'm not surprised. I'm really not. Overall, I didn't feel like there was much improvement with the characters. Eventually, I got used to them, which is why the other movies that came after felt better to me, and some of the characters grew on me and were really funny and entertaining. But for my initial impression, it didn't make me fond of this movie, and it also stopped me from really engaging in the Bratz series until way later in life. Okay, I did not rush every Saturday to watch the series, and I think I attempted the first 5 episodes, and I just couldn't anymore, because I was just like, y'all ruined the Bratz. Y'all ruined the Bratz for me. Maybe not for everybody else, but y'all definitely ruined it for me. I'm sorry. And I just couldn't. Okay, so the visuals is probably the best part of the movie. Visuals are probably the best part of the movie. You know, no, the visuals don't look like anything today, but back then, CGI was still relatively novel, and the Bratz visuals felt like the dolls were coming to life. Like, I think Barbie and the Nutcracker had come out a few years before, so I saw the impact of those kinds of graphics on promoting doll brands. And for the Bratz, it really made it feel like the dolls came to life back then. You know, the hair movement, the outfits, it came alive. Unfortunately, the details themselves were missing. Obviously, there were many backgrounders and locations recycled throughout the Bratz series and TV show, and movies. The Bratz TV series is TV show. The Bratz TV series and even some of the movies, even if they weren't intended to be the same location or places. You know, eventually it became a staple of the show, and even a gag, because after watching Super Babyz, I saw that little wink from a Bratz kid, Yasmin, when she made her little Easter egg appearance. But, you know, it could make things confusing sometimes, because some characters would look like one character, and then they wouldn't be that character. So, like, in Bratz Rock Angelz, when they were at the hotel in London, that looked like the same hotel in New York, too. In the Bratz series. So I'm just like, wait, where are they? Where did they go? Like, and this happened twice. Okay. Oh wait, I don't think that was even the hotel in London. Never mind, because I think that new hotel was in the series. Okay, so I'm getting all confused. I know some of these hotels that appeared in some of these shows as a hotel in Europe was also interpreted as a hotel in New York. So anyway, because a lot of the same backgrounds and the same, you know, layouts, and some of the same people, like physically drawn people, were used over and over again, it was hard to tell who was who. Okay, And one of the worst parts about the visuals in the movie was the lack of attention to the Bratz girls' fashion passions, rather. It seemed like they translated their fashion passions into personalities instead. For example, instead of Chloe wearing dramatic clothes like shimmering, sparkly fabrics and animal prints, they changed the dramatic clothes into a drama queen. So she's a drama queen. Instead of Yasmin liking bohemian and vintage fashion, she behaves like a stereotypical bohemian. Don't know where they were going with Jade, but I guess her personality was cool, not her style. I don't know. While it's good to focus more on their individual personalities than clothes, they were known for also having individual style, and it was significant because that was a part of their diversity in comparison to other doll brands at the time, who stated that everybody had to not only act the same but dress the same and look the same. Okay, so their fashion passions are pretty significant. All right, they are the girls with a passion for fashion. Okay, and unfortunately the visuals didn't cater to that detail. We ended up seeing Bratz characters in outfits they shouldn't have been in. Perhaps the first sign of this was the switch between Chloe and Jade's outfits. This irritated me from the first scene because I couldn't tell who was doing the talking. I literally kept confusing Jade for Chloe. When she first opened her mouth, I was like, wait, that's Jade? She sounds more like Chloe. And then I found out that was Chloe. I was like, really? The problem was that the dolls had already been released, okay? And Jade was my favorite, of course. I love cutting edge fashion. I love Jade, alright? And when they stuck my favorite outfit on Chloe, I was in an uproar. First off, why would Chloe, the girl who likes shimmery, sparkly fabrics and animal print, as well as trendy outfits, be wearing them Beetlejuice shoes? Okay? Only Jade could pull off them Beetlejuice shoes, not Chloe. Okay? But again, no one had the heart to adapt the Bratz correctly. No one had the heart. And I find that to be some poor promotion. I mean, I've seen some doll brands promoting outfits that don't exist. But dang, at least Mattel will make sure the outfits they're releasing are promoted on the right doll, because they hope those dolls will sell. If you're gonna make a movie to promote the line, at least sell it properly. Now little girls were confused in toy aisles, buying up Chloe's instead of Jade's, and Jade's instead of Chloe's, depending on the one they like best. Because they couldn't get their styles right and didn't pay the same painstaking attention to detail the designers did working for MGA, the passions got all mixed up. It got to the point I didn't even care about their fashion passions, and it got to the point I stopped caring if I could tell them apart. Honestly. Unfortunately, I believe this is why they weren't able to produce more Bratz Pack members in the series, for fear they would look too much alike. Kumi, Dana, and Tiana would just look like Jade. And this was made worse when they started putting their outfits on Jade. If they stuck to the outfits they actually released for these characters, we could at least tell the difference between the characters based on what they wore. Even if the CGI animation wasn't advanced enough for them to design them differently from each other. Okay? We at least could tell the difference by their outfits. But since they didn't care to pay attention to that, we got a limited Bratz Pack universe. Period. With only a few Bratz Pack members showing up in the movies in the series. And yes, all of this traveled into the Bratz series. Thanks to Rock Angelz. They put ooh la la outfits on Jade and that Bratz Go to Paris. And ooh la la outfits on Sasha. Knowing good and well those girls didn't even appear in the line. Even if they were supposed to. This prevented Kumi and Dana from ever appearing in the future. They did the same in the Being Who We Are music video. It got so mixed up, that eventually fashion passions no longer matter in the actual Bratz brand. Which was what made Bratz special. They had individual style. They started throwing outfits on any one of the characters. And they started looking more and more identical with less individuality. And that's especially evident in Passion for Fashion Diamondz later down the line, in Fashion Pixiez. Even Sun-Kissed. Not Sun-Kissed Summer, Sun-Kissed with the clothesments, Chloe and Yasmin. Everybody started looking more and more identical as a result. Because they just didn't care about their individuality. Thanks to this movie. They're just giving everybody each other's outfits. Okay? Bratz Rock Angelz movie started that mess, in my opinion. Thankfully, the outfits were still well made, even if less individualistic. So, I mean, I can't complain too much, but I was just like... Also, because they released characters out of order, making Roxy a new girl, when most Bratz fans been knowing her a while, it's likely any other former stories connected to them would have been altered or rearranged. You know, they weren't good at giving a proper backdrop for the dolls. You know, especially when they decided not to make them consistent with the timeline. You know, they don't line up with the way the dolls are being sold. So, it's just a confusing mess. Okay? It's just a confusing mess. The music in the movie was okay, but it wasn't what I expected. I expected to hear more rock music to set the Rock Angelz mood, and especially the music from the Rock Angelz album. Unfortunately, it was filled with songs from the future Bratz TV series, very pop and urban, with some random pop rock numbers, and only one song from the album made it in at the very end of the freaking movie. Overall, the music felt like it was tossed in there to give a Bratz feeling, but not a Rock Angelz feeling. And this is what happens when you want to tell too many stories at once. Anyway, y'all might say I'm super negative and not a real Bratz fan, and that I'm the only one who feels this way. I agree, I'm a Bratz fan outsider today. In today's world, where the kids who grew up with Bratz have grown up and have a different attachment to Bratz. But back in the day, I know I wasn't the only one. All of the older Bratz fans back then had the same problem with this movie, which is why everything was cleaned up better in the next couple of movies that came after. Notice how Genie, Magic, and Forever Diamonds had music from their soundtracks. Notice how the movies inculcated the lines better and gave the fifth girl on the line more screen time or importance. They still couldn't hardly get their outfits right, and they still made old-time characters like Katya suddenly seem like new girls, but at least they cleaned things up a little more. They wouldn't have done that if fans hadn't complained. So I don't think I was the only one, even if I probably am one of the few remaining fans from back in that time today. Okay? The movie brought dolls to life with its CGI, and it had humor and entertainment and all that, but it tried to tell too many stories at once. It didn't really focus on Rock Angelz. The characters remained altered and misinterpreted, so different from the doll universe, and the music wasn't even from the freaking soundtrack. So that's why Rock Angelz is at the bottom of this freaking list. Coming in next is Bratz Go to Paris. I wrestle with whether I should even include this on this list because it's basically like BFF and Good Vibes, where it's a collection of episodes made into a movie from the collection of episodes from the TV series. But I think with this DVD they attempted to make all 3 episodes into one full-length film, so it barely gets a pass, but it is full-length. So re-released in 2013, several years after it aired on television. They basically wanted to give fans more movies but didn't have the same backing they did back in the day, so they just started re-releasing stuff. And I remember I was about 23, and so at that time I just never really considered this a movie. But here we go. So, the story, written by Peggy Nichol, focuses on the Bratz as they are recruited by Byron Powell, who they discover is a spy, to go undercover as spies themselves, okay? Someone has been poisoning supermodels in Paris right before designer Chachi's major show. The models end up aging from the poisons. So the Bratz agree to help, not being able to resist going to the City of Lights. Chloe is hoping for a romance story. Yasmin is hoping for inspiration for her writing. Jade is a major fan of Chachi. And Sasha wants to experience the nightlife, I think. Anyway, when the girls show apprehension about going to Paris, Byron tells them he only needs one of them anyway. He will put them through a spy test to determine who will go. This sparks an obvious rivalry between the girls as they all try to beat the other and hold each other back. But in the final race to the finish, Yasmin crashes. The Bratz resolve that they will not leave one another behind. Byron reveals the real test was one of working together, and he agrees that all of them are ready to go. The Bratz pack, along with Cameron and Dylan, arrive at the runway show to find Chachi stressed and having a breakdown because his models are dropping like flies. Nicole, one of his last remaining models, tells the girls what's been happening. Jade comforts him, and in her, Chachi finds a new muse. At this moment, Nicole shows herself to be jealous of this, but she gets distracted when she catches sight of Cameron. She begins flirting with him the rest of the movie, causing Chloe to be jealous. Though in the middle, she is, you know, jealous and sneaking around and overhearing conversations and whatnot. But anyway, in the midst of all this, Roxy shows up with former bandmate Cruz, and Sasha becomes smitten. Okay, she and Cruz form a relationship. However, because the girls are in Paris for a mission, she ends up leaving him hanging right before their first official date. He takes it personal. Later, Sasha finds him on the cover of a magazine with Alonce, and she's heartbroken, which leaves her unable to focus. Eventually, the Bratz realize they've got to stay focused, especially when someone breaks into their hotel room, attacks Yasmin, and flees. Byron takes the evidence and finds a strand of hair that belongs to modeling agent Elamina, who was introduced in the beginning. Believing they found the culprit, Byron drops the case. The Bratz aren't so convinced. As they dig deeper into this, Jade and Chloe are lured into an abandoned room by Nicole and poisoned right before they were to appear in the show. So she turns out to be the culprit. Eventually, Sasha and Yasmin are able to find them as Nicole is trying to drag them into a car to escape. The girls are able to take her down using their new spy techniques and gadgets, and they save the day. In the end, Sasha is able to talk to Cruz about the misunderstanding, so they're happy, and the show continues on, making Chachi a success. Now, my first impression of the re-release was that this was really cheap. Most fans wanted a new movie, not a DVD with already released episodes. By the time the DVD was released, I'd already seen everything, so I had no reason to buy this. But the story itself is really cool. It's one of the best Bratz TV episodes. It was nice to have Paris as the setting, a runway show as the focus, and it was just exciting, action-packed, full of drama and suspenseful. It was a nice conclusion to the first season, and a pretty good enough 3 parts to even make into a feature-length film. So, a full-length film. So this was a lot more cleaned up in comparison to Rock Angelz, and it maintained focus. I would have liked the movie to explore Paris a little more than it did. It kind of didn't focus on the landmarks that are so iconic, but the gem was that it wasn't stereotypical. The other thing I don't think was necessary was the initial competition to see who would get the spot to go to Paris. Or rather, it definitely seemed like Byron tricked them. Made them look like fools. Okay, he made a fool of them, you know, because first they said they couldn't go because of the magazine. That was why they said they couldn't go, clearly not seeing the opportunity to create an epic article from this adventure. But okay, Byron tells them that he only needs one of them anyway. Okay, so during the I Spy competition, they you know, are like, okay, well, you know, I'm gonna be the one. But then after the thing happens with Yasmin, they all agree not to go. So when Byron says, well, that was the test, you all passed, that still left the problem of who was going to run the magazine. If that was such an issue before, all of them winning together doesn't solve the initial problem that caused the competition in the first place. So I'm just like, I think Byron knew he could convince them all to go if he motivated them to compete, but they never brought up the magazine again. So it was like, well, if y'all like, woohoo, we can all go, why was it such a big problem to begin with? Because y'all was like, what about the magazine? That was the problem in the beginning. You know what I'm saying? Or maybe they were just bringing it up. You know, like, bringing it up, not thinking that none of them can go. But then Byron rolls the stakes by saying, oh, I don't need one of you anyway. So, again, whatever. Another problem I had with this, it's an ooh la la theme without Dana and Kumi. And that grinds my gears. Especially when Sasha and Jay weren't even in the ooh la la line. And now the possibility of them being in it is slim to none because the other 4 girls wore their outfits. The same problem that started with Rock Angelz. So when it comes to the characters, Chloe really irritated me in this movie. I mean, I understand she's jealous of Nicole because she supposedly has a secret crush on Cameron, whatever. But she has been dating and flirting with other guys throughout the whole Bratz TV series and in all the books. She only recognizes Cameron when he's moved on. Then she just wants him all to herself. Girl, he's not yours to claim. So that really bothered me about Chloe. It always bothered me about Chloe. Okay, like if you're gonna be invested in Cameron and be jealous, then you need just to stay with Cameron and stop flirting with Shane and what was the other guy name in I can't even think about it in Good Luck Charms' book. But you need to just stay with Cameron and stop flirting with all these other boys. And if you're gonna flirt with other boys, which I'm all for it, I'm all for independent, open relationships, but you need to let Cameron do the same. Okay. That stuff bothered me. All right. Anyway, Sasha, I was happy that finally Sasha received a love interest. I get tired of people thinking black girls are these tough, independent characters without layers. And, you know, again, they're always trying to masculinize black women. And I've said this before, they've always tried to masculinize black women. We are never the feminine, stereotypical women. We're always othered, okay? And a lot of us are just like any other of the white women, okay? But we're never given that treatment, all right? So I was kind of glad she was developing a love interest. I think this is the first episode I ever saw Sasha cry, and I actually would have loved to see more emotion from her in the TV series, but that just didn't happen a lot. So I think Sasha had a pretty good development here. Of course, Cruz looked just like Dylan, but okay. He was even wearing Dylan's outfit, but alright. I love seeing Yasmin and Jay's roles in this. Jay was super focused on the task, despite Yasmin trying to find inspiration for her writing assignment. You know, she was also on task. You know, everybody, those two characters, Jay and Sasha, were on task. They focused. They were like, we here for a mission and we gonna do it. I don't even know why Dylan was there. And unfortunately, all the supporting characters felt recycled, but it became a staple of the show and movie, so, like, just wasn't memorable. Like the other characters, I was just like, okay, Chachi is back. Wait, what's his name even? Chachi? I don't even think his name was Chachi. I think that was the dude from the series. His name was Jean Paul. I've been calling him Chachi this whole time. Been calling him Chachi this whole time. I had to check myself. His name was Jean Paul, but that's what I meant. He looked just like Chachi from the series. So anyway, it was confusing. The visuals. Goodness. The visuals were meh, in my opinion. They mostly spent time in one location, and much of the visuals had been recycled from the TV series, like in all the original episodes. I mean, I think they did at least choose a different kind of hotel. Did they? Yeah, I think they did. Anyway, the outfits were beautiful on the characters. They just weren't the right outfits, okay? They keep switching outfits, and I keep getting like, okay. y'all just not even catering to the dolls at all, okay? And a lot of characters were recycled from the TV episodes, which caused me a lot of confusion. Yeah, I'm even calling Jean Paul Chachi because I'm just like, who is who? Who is this person? Okay, I don't even know if Roxy is Roxy. Is that really Roxy? Well, I think because they said her name, then I know that's Roxy. But it's just like, who are these people? Okay, so and I also think they could have put a lot more Parisian scenes in it to make it more visually stunning. You know, it felt flat in comparison to what I was hoping for. You know, I felt this would have been better if they had trained in Paris, you know, rather than training in America and then flying to Paris. But then, you know, then we could see more of the scenes and sights. But of course, they wanted to have a test of friendship first and whatnot, you know. But I still felt like there should have been more when covering Paris. Because this was not originally a full-length film, it doesn't have its own music, like music that's a staple of it. It's just overplay songs from all the other movies and episodes. So it doesn't feel like it has its own soundtrack. It was nice to hear some familiar favorites, but it just didn't have music that set the mood, due to this originally meaning to be a couple of 20-minute episodes. Overall, the story was pretty exciting and amazing. You know, I was definitely on the edge of my seat, but it misses the actual Bratz backdrop in it. You know, the ooh la la line characters were just all thrown off, and the characters in this movie annoyed me. Well, particularly Chloe, she annoyed me, but Nicole annoyed me, and Chachi, they all annoyed me. The visuals were blah, and the music was just shoved in there because it wasn't really meant to like be a movie. So in my opinion, it's not as like top notch as some of the others. Coming in next is Bratz Girls Really Rock. I first watched this movie in 2008 when I was around 18 years old, started my first year in college, so I was pretty grown up by the time I watched this. I don't think my feelings have changed too much since I watched it 12 years ago. Ooh, man, I feel old. Oh my goodness. So, written by Nora Lally, I think Lally is the last name, and Meg Martin, the story appears to be a movie musical about a movie musical.
It centers on the Bratz Pack members Chloe, Sasha, Yasmin, Jade, Dylan, and Eaton heading to Camp Starshine, an arts camp in the woods. Initially, the Bratz go to the camp for fun, but they soon realize everyone else is taking things way too seriously there. The camp is hosting a contest for campers to perform something spectacular, with the movie director and the audience to decide the winner. So basically, the winner will get a spot in a movie, or get a movie made about them, or what have you. Eventually, the Bratz girls start to see why everyone is serious, and they start to get serious when their own individual talents are recognized. Eventually, Dylan and their new friend Anna begin to help them realize they are changing, especially when a self-centered dance instructor named Diamondz threatens to separate them so she can get her shot at the limelight. In the end, they're able to unite back together and win the contest along with their friend Anna. Okay, so overall, the story is okay. It's pretty engaging in a lot of ways. My first impression of it wasn't as bad as with Rock Angelz because I'd gotten used to the new Bratz universe by this time. Of course, the story was also more focused on the girls trying to stay together amidst competition, so it was more narrow in its focus. It wasn't trying to tell as many stories at once. One thing that was always interesting about the Bratz doll storytelling was that they didn't mind showing the girls competing against one another or challenging themselves, and that was different than the princess sweet stories often told about girls, you know, but they always learned that they were stronger together. And this story was about them being diverse and strong apart, but stronger when united. You know, they also learned to take their talents seriously and to work hard to reach their dreams rather than goof off all the time. Anna learned to make time for a life. You know, they all learned to balance work and play. It was a very cute story. It was also the first story where Dylan actually had a serious relationship with a girl, and that was with Anna. It was nice to see him in a different light. However, I still felt like he was in limerence with Anna, not in love, and honestly, the boy only saw her across the room and thought he was madly in love. Like, he knew nothing about her, and actually hated ballet according to the Secret Date electronic game. So he only got into ballet and all that just to get closer to Anna, because she was pretty. Okay, that's it. Okay, Dylan probably did get serious with Anna, but to me, he really didn't fall in love with her. He fell in love with the idea of being with her. So personally, I wasn't feeling it. And now, I'm not the most romantic person, so maybe that plays a role. But if I could give you all an example of my favorite on-screen romances, it would be Sakura and Starrin and Toya and Yukito from Card Captor. Okay? I like relationships that develop over time. Relationships and bonds that form after people get to know each other well. Dylan and Anna were, I don't know, something about Dylan's approach to Anna felt like his approach to any other girl. You know, she just took the bait. And this is aside from the fact I don't really like the way they developed Dylan's personality entirely in the CGI universe anyway. So, you know, I mean, there's nothing wrong with the goofy side, but it'd be nice if it was balanced out with some depth or some dimension or some other layers. But okay. Overall, though, I thought it was a pretty engaging movie. I found myself wanting to see what would happen next. Of course, it was predictable, just like most movies based off of dolls, but everything is predictable nowadays since every story has been told before. You know, it's hard to please people 100%. You know, I sometimes look forward to a predictable story with a predictable ending, you know, as long as I can follow along. My biggest criticism of this movie, though, is that just like with Rock Angelz, it really wasn't focused on the girls really rock line. I mean, they did at least initially have the girls attempting to perform their rock band to win the contest, and they eventually did perform the rock band in the contest, but the great majority of the movie was spent on them doing other things and not really focused on the band line at all. What's worse is the outfits from the dolls didn't even appear in the movie. I don't know why I remember them appearing in it back in 2008, but I watched it recently and didn't see it. Maybe there was a change in the scene. It also feels like this movie didn't really happen in the Bratz universe. In the end, Chloe broke the fourth wall, if that's what you call it, and said she forgot her line while they were all saying goodbye after camp. When they were on the red carpet, I think it was said that it was a movie about their real experiences, but I couldn't really tell. So this makes fixing up this fandom page of mine even more of a challenge. I've got to analyze it again. Overall, I would say the story wasn't remarkable, but it wasn't bad either. You know, what was most annoying about it was that it was a musical. And just about everything was a musical back then, thanks to the popularity of High School Musical, Hannah Montana, and Camp Rock. It kind of got out of hand. You know, Girls Really Rock was riding that bandwagon like all the other dolls. Even American Girl was reported to be working on their own Julie musical. weird. Anyway, the story was designed around musical cliches common in then teen musicals such as friendship, drama, romance, and excuses to perform. The characters brought over the same personality traits they have from rock Angelz, so hey. Again, Jade was the only one focused on fashion. They didn't dare inculcate other interests in her character, such as her interest in extreme sports. But the movie did a good job of introducing their individual talents and giving them individual screen time, despite the fact the movie was supposed to be told from Sasha's point of view. While Anna was cute and everything, I actually would have preferred the story to actually introduce a Bratz Pack member instead of the random movie-only character. There was so many other characters in the line, like Phoebe, Roxy, Megan, and Dana, all in the Girls Really Rock line, but they didn't bother trying to inculcate them in the movie. But it didn't hurt the movie, so she was okay. Like, I liked her story of trying to balance work and play and learning not to become a slave to someone else's dream. I didn't like her initial attitude towards the Bratz, like sneering in the cafeteria at them, but she evolved as a character, so she was okay. Eden barely had a role, yet again, but Dylan was throwing a romance story. You know, I would have liked a movie where the boys had more of a storyline outside of romance. You know, like what was Dylan's wishes, hopes, and dreams? Like I felt they made him pretty one-dimensional throughout most of the Bratz movies and the TV series. You know, I hate that about Ken in the Barbie universe. And yes, I know it's mostly about the girls, but it would have been nice to see more development from the boys. And that's actually what I loved about Generation Girl all these years. Blaine was just like, he has so much dimension to him. You know, he just didn't have any his own books, which he should have. But anyway, you know, I wish there were more episodes that catered to the Bratz boys. You know, I think Crush and Rush was the only one. It was yet again a romance story. You know, there's got to be more than them girls, okay? But this is why I've been writing my own Bratz series. Maybe just as a fan, I might not get no recognition for it, but I've been writing my own Bratz series. And hopefully with all of this research I've been doing about the Bratz universe, I could get that going and kind of unite the Bratz universes together. You know, I don't want to take, even if I don't like these universes, I don't want to take away from it because I know they're really important to a lot of Bratz fans and they're a part of Bratz. But I just think some cleanup needs to be done where the universes kind of are merged together because so far they're so disconnected from each other. So, as far as visuals, I felt like the visuals had improved, mostly due to the era and time. You know, CGI was getting better, and it showed. They still recycled background characters, and I saw a few Easter eggs, but I think by now they kind of felt it became a staple of the universe, so it fit. The setting was really interesting, though I don't understand why an arts camp had to be in the middle of the woods. You know, it didn't make sense to me, because it's not like it's about camping or learning how to survive. That's the whole point of camps that are in the woods. So it didn't have to be in the middle of the woods, but a real camp setting was nice. I think the visuals would have been better if the Girls Really Rock outfits had actually been included though. Music. Again, a musical. When I first watched the movie in 2008, I couldn't stand the music. I thought it was annoying and out of place. This kind of movie didn't need a musical. When I watched it again in 2020, it didn't turn out to be as annoying as I thought it would be. In fact, it felt like the music didn't really take over the movie, which was a good thing. And so, back then, maybe it was annoying because I was tired of musicals. Especially in this movie, the songs felt poorly written. Particularly We're Gonna Shine. Like, I hate songs that just talk, sing every little line. Like, it just feels like they could be talking instead of singing. In fact, the movie would have been fine without the music. Some songs were rewritten and reprised, such as All About Me, because that was originally We All Could Be Stars. Summertime Fun was nice, and Friends Are Everything was pretty fun. It was a fun summertime little soundtrack. And hey, at least all the songs from the soundtrack appeared in the movie. But I can definitely say you won't find me bumping these songs in my car the way I would other albums from the Bratz. Like, unfortunately, this is my least favorite soundtrack. And yet, it was the only one that had every single song in the movie. Overall, hey. So, to sum it up, the story was easy to follow, it had interesting points, and all the music from the soundtrack was actually in the movie. But the movie didn't add to the characters in any way, the story was cliche, and the musical numbers were poorly written or just not necessary in the movie. Coming in next is Bratz Babyz The Movie. It was released in 2006, my junior year in high school, and I was around 16 years old. Y'all gonna be mad that I rated this higher than some of y'all faves because it's just a cheesy Bratz Babyz movie. Well, I do have a soft spot for the storytelling in a lot of the Babyz movies because I think they all mostly have at least a message to send, and the messages are more diverse than overcoming Barbie and romance. So with the screenplay by John Doolittle, I think that's the person who wrote it, the story focuses on twin Bratz babies, Nita and Nora, as they get ready to join Chloe, Jade, Sasha, and Yasmin at the daycare center in the mall. Or the preschool center in the mall. Anyway, Snappy, Nita's puppy, jumps into Nora's bag when no one's looking, and Nora, hurrying to keep up with Nita, rushes out without knowing Snappy is in her bag. Once at the daycare center, Snappy gets out and escapes into the mall. The babies escape too and find Snappy has been dogged at by Dwayne, the mall bully. He demands $50 from the Bratz babies as a ransom for the dog. They all have different ideas, and Jade and Chloe and Nora try to get Snappy back one way, while Sasha, Yasmin, and Nita try to get her back another. Okay, Jade, Chloe, and Nora try to earn the money unsuccessfully, and Sasha, Yasmin, and Nita just try to steal her back. Okay. When time starts to run out, they decide the only way to get $50 is for Nora to win it in the karaoke contest. The babies learn to team up and overcome the bully and get the puppy back. So, okay, while at face value, this may seem like a cheesy story centered on a bunch of babies that don't really sound or act like babies to some people, I felt it was pretty clever in its approach. You know, as someone who has worked with children, I can tell you that some of the babies' behavior is spot on. It's like watching the Rugrats without the baby talk. Like, I liked how the scene was set in a mall from the eyes of a 3-year-old where everything in the world seems bigger. You know, I liked that the story took two different approaches to dealing with a bully and ultimately taught the lesson that you just don't give in to a bully because they will keep coming back to harm you. I also have a soft place in my heart for this movie because Nita and Nora remind me of me and my own twin sister when we were younger. My sister was more of the Nora, sweet and would get nervous easily, and I was the Nita, you know, strong-willed and had more of a smart mouth and bossy. You know, I had to realize that sometimes I would say things that would hurt her. And it wasn't my intention, but I did feel like we always got in trouble because of my sister's clumsiness. And that would infuriate me. So now, while I did enjoy the movie, of course there were some things I didn't understand. I mean, of course babies won't do things that make sense all the time, but still, you know, I thought that when the babies lost the puppy, you know, they should have immediately told their teacher. You know, they were afraid of getting in big trouble. But when they were caught after sneaking out, which was worse, Miss Calabash didn't even react or call their parents or anything. So it wouldn't have been bad at all if they had told their teacher that they accidentally brought a puppy to the mall and they let it out. So after the first time they got in trouble for escaping, or which wasn't really in trouble, they should have realized, well, Miss Calabash is nice. She didn't even get mad at us when we escaped. So why don't we just tell her about the puppy? And it's like none of the Bratz babies realized that they should have just told the teacher in the first place. And none of the babies told the security guards or any adults about the bully Dwayne either, which I thought was unusual. Like, kids usually tell an adult when someone is being mean to them. Usually, especially at 3 years old. And if they don't, there's usually an indication as to why they're not doing it. Instead of trying to run away from the security guard, why didn't they just tell him why they kept escaping or why they were having a hard time in the first place? Like, I mean, maybe they didn't want to admit they brought a puppy into the mall and didn't want to get in trouble because, you know, from their 3-year-old mind, if we tell somebody we got a puppy, we'll be in trouble. You know, not even thinking they get in trouble all this time by even sneaking out, running from the security guards and things like that, you know. But, you know, after they got caught the first time by security and saw that they weren't really in trouble, they should have just confessed the problem. Or even thought to do so. Also, why didn't the adults ask them why they were even sneaking out? I mean, I know Miss Calabash and Officer Murphy were dim-witted, but really? Anyway, I think this story would have been a lot shorter if that had occurred. You know, Nora would have never found the courage to stand up and out on her own, and none of them would have stood up to the bully Dwayne. However, I would have written it differently to where the babies had no choice but to take control, basically having them exhaust all options. Then this kind of story would have made sense. Well, from a mischievous baby's perspective. The characters were cute and funny. Yeah, of course, some of them were annoying. It was nice to be introduced to some new characters in the Bratz universe. Still wish Yamit from the Little Dancers had been in it. I think her name is Yamit, is that how you say it? But almost everyone was in this movie. I would like to see an older version of Nora and Harvey one day, you know, but back to the movie. Nita was definitely a handful with her temper tantrums, okay? But I can't say anything because I was bossy and tough like her. So, you know, but still, not a likable quality. Even I can admit that. I didn't like how mean she was to her sister the whole movie. And all the Bratz babies could say was, break it up, you two. No, it wasn't the two of them fighting. It was Nita basically bullying her sister. And Nora even said her older sister Jillian was also mean. So she's been getting it from both her older sisters, okay? And she got it from Dwayne. So Nora's getting bullied every which way, at home and at the mall. You know, I am glad that Nita realized her behavior was wrong by the end of the movie. Admittedly, though, many 3-year-olds do act like Nita. I mean, as much as I didn't like her personality, it's irritating. A lot of 3-year-olds act like Nita. You know, they throw tantrums to get their way. They boss each other around. I mean, hey, can't expect a whole lot of maturity from a baby. I was a little bothered by Cameron and Harvey's behavior towards their teacher as well. You know, they found it fun to throw toys and whatever else they could find at their teacher, and it was kind of cringy to watch. Like, I kept wanting to call some parents. Like, give me a belt. You know what I mean? Like, let's call some parents. You know, get in the corner. Go into timeout. Like, poor Miss Calabash was so sweet, but those kids were just rotten, and she didn't have the backbone to get the class under control. And that just, it irked me something terrible. You know, Nita earned my respect when she shaped that classroom up. I'll tell you that. But I hate that Cameron and Harvey participated in that garbage. The main 4 Bratz girls were interpreted as their usual selves, with Yasmin being given the least screen time in development, surprisingly. But at least they showed up and out when necessary. The visuals. Due to 2D animation, it obviously didn't have the fancy CGI graphics everyone was used to by now, but it also didn't have the luscious greenery, the sinister sunsets, and realistic-looking buildings present in Starrin and Stylin. It gave me a Pup Named Scooby-Doo type of vibe. I don't know if y'all remember that show, but was that from the 90s or early 2000s? Yeah, I think that was from the 90s, but it gave me a Pup Named Scooby-Doo type vibes. Like, to me, the animation felt cheaper than Starrin and Stylin, but it gave it an old-fashioned cartoonish charm that brought me back to the good old days of Saturday morning cartoons. The music was everything to me, okay? I think this is the most memorable Bratz Babyz track list. My favorite song is Catch Me If You Can, because, you know, I just love that club pop vibe, you know, like I'm at club quarantine, you know what I'm saying? You know, the music was catchy and unforgettable for me. Okay, and I think it set the mall scene well. Overall, the story had a good message. It brought me back to my childhood, and I could relate well to the characters. And it was cute and funny, but some actions didn't make sense in the story. Some of the characters were a bit annoying, and the 2D wasn't of the best quality. Coming in next is Bratz The Movie. I know a lot of y'all Bratz fans are going to be on here like, I know this heifer didn't just put the worst Bratz movie higher than Rock Angels and Girls Really Rock. Yes, I did. This movie arrived in theaters in the summer of 2007. Summer break for me before I entered my last year in high school. And I saw it the day it arrived in theaters. Now, yes, I was a bit stunned to see a completely different story than the one that had developed the last couple of years, especially because the CGI movies and TV show had been really popular. So you think they continue to profit off of it. But it didn't make me too mad, because in fact it made me happy, because finally people could understand that the CGI TV series was not the only canon universe surrounding the Bratz. In fact, the only canon universe is the doll universe itself. This movie proved it. Unfortunately, people will call you less of a fan if you actually like this movie. I don't care. You know, I've been with the Bratz nearly 20 years. 21 years, really. So I think I have the right to like any take on the Bratz, okay? It doesn't measure how much of a fan I am, alright? So while everyone else was complaining that it didn't have the Bratz magazine and the Tweebles, I was ready to dive into a new take on the Bratz. So I took this movie for what it was. This doesn't mean I felt it was the best movie in the Bratz universe, but it did have some strengths. The screenplay was by Susan Estelle Jansen, I think, and the story was by Adam de la Pena. I heard Sean McNamara, the director, had a huge hand in the story too. So I hope I'm saying everybody's name right. Anyway, it's centered on 4 diverse girls from diverse backgrounds: Chloe, Jade, Sasha, and Yasmin, who start the big bad high school for the first time. Enthusiastic, excited, and confident, they shake the campus as soon as they arrive with their fashionable style and amazing talents. This catches the attention of student body president Meredith, who feels it's her duty to maintain control and keep the cliques separate. Of course, because Meredith has organized the school according to cliques, and because she's had the power to do so, being the rich daughter of a principal and woman with connections to MTV, all the students have helped her in keeping the status quo. Eventually, the cliques end up pulling the 4 girls apart for 2 years, and it seems Meredith has won. However, during a cafeteria food fight at lunch, the girls all end up in detention, leading them to talking out their differences and rekindling their friendship. The Bratz are back to threaten Meredith's power. She tries everything to wrestle back power. She tries to throw another Super Sweet 16, this time with MTV involved, and she attempts to organize and monopolize the school talent show so she can decide who joins and who doesn't. Though her stunts have the whole school turning on the Bratz, including their so-called friends, the Bratz manage to bind together and overcome Meredith by tying with her for the win at the talent show. Ultimately, they're able to unite the cliques on stage with them and wrestle back control, which was the true win. Overall, the story took some elements from Rock Angelz, which was wrestling control from a Barbie-like girl and empowering themselves, accepting themselves, and not letting someone label them. You know, while it took that element, it was more clear in its focus in the story it wanted to tell, which I appreciated. This story brought Bratz back to his roots, actually. Initially, Carter Bryant designed them to be the cool girls in school. Okay, and according to the book You Don't Own Me, How Mattel versus MGA Entertainment exposed Barbie's dark side, that was even going to be the slogan. So the movie played off of that, showing how cool the Bratz really were, how they were able to conquer the school with their style, talents, and individuality. And yes, they did threaten the Barbie empire, much like what they did with Meredith. And ironically, the ending credits lists Meredith's mom as Barbie Baxter Dimley. Because of this, I have a certain fondness for the movie. However, let's be real, the movie was one big cliche, especially because it seemed like a big ripoff of Mean Girls and High School Musical, which again was really popular at this time. The emphasis on cliques, on some pair not really just subscribing to the cliques, and then some group using music or some sort of show to take back power and overcome the cliques. You know, it's the exact same story as High School Musical, to be honest, with some elements stripped from Mean Girls, like the seating charts. Like, I remember in Mean Girls in the beginning, they had, like, in the notebook, you know, maybe it was a parody. You know, maybe that's what it was. I don't know. But to be fair, it's a lot like an exaggerated form of high school. You know, some people do go their own way in high school, especially when people start joining after school activities. I've separated from a lot of my childhood friends in high school. We eventually came back together, but some people just parted ways. You know, it takes a lot of strength to overcome cliquish behavior. Of course, it was never this exaggerated, and I believe the director said he was inspired by his daughter's vision of high school, her fears and ideals the summer before she started. So that's why it came across so exaggerated. You know, our visions of things before we've experienced it, especially as children, are always more exaggerated. You know, imaginations are funny like that. Now, this wasn't all I really wanted from the movie, to be honest. What I really was hoping for was actually maybe more of another world destination story, you know, possibly one for Tokyo Go-Go, more like Cheetah Girls 2 or the Lizzie McGuire movie. You know, it would have been nice to have more Bratz Pack members like Fiona, Tiana, Kimi, Maylin, and Eaton adapted for the big screen. Or maybe the movie would actually adapt Bratz The Movie line on the screen, with Sheridan and Bryce returning. But it really had no connection to the movie line, which was weird. You know, but it was a decent story about friendship and celebrating diversity. To me, it wasn't big enough to be on the big screen, but it was decent. With the star-studded cast, it was hard to look away from the movie, okay? As soon as I saw Annalise Vanderpool, I got a little excited because I love That's So Raven. And Melissa Joel was from Fabulous, one of my other favorite shows back then. Chelsea Staub was the showstopper. She played Meredith very well. And Sasha's father, I just realized, was in Casey Undercover. So this movie gives me more reasons to revisit. But what was best about the movie was the actual development of the characters. Though I may not have liked everything about the movie, finally, a movie tapped into the Bratz Pack's past. We saw parents. No, the families didn't match the Bratz universe, which was disappointing. Chloe should have an older sister named Sonia and 2 infant siblings. Her mother should be a glam woman named Polita. But I think even before Polita was released, her name was Katie in the Hollywood Holidays book. But anyway, Sasha should have a younger sister named Zama. I'm quite sure by now, after examining Rebel Royalty prototype at Itsy City Fish Shack, that Jade is also of Japanese descent, not just Chinese. But at least they attempted to develop a backstory for these girls, okay? Yasmin's mom may have appeared, but I think they focused on her Bubby and Manny, so it's a pass. I'm happy they also tapped into her Jewish past. You know, Carter Bryant did intend her to be Hispanic, but she was kind of transformed into an Iranian Jewish girl, too, after her name changed before debut, from Lupe to Yasmin. So, we all know that name is a Persian name. So, I would like to think that her heritage consists of both. You know, with the parents around, the Bratz weren't just acting out unwatched and unattended like in the CGI movies. You know, I never could understand how these girls were secret agents or traveling the world without their parents' knowledge. Like, I mean, maybe it's not necessary because it's not real, you know, and it helps kids dream. Like, dreaming is fun, you know, but it still crossed my mind. Nothing it didn't cross my mind. I was like, ooh, they're secret agents, that's so cool, that's so fun, but where's their mom and dad? I wish my mom and dad would let me do something like that. Like, I kept thinking that to myself. I wish my parents would let me do something like this. You know what I'm saying? But maybe my parents aren't as supportive as other parents. I don't know. But Bratz the Movie was more realistic in that way. And that's saying a lot, considering how exaggerated the movie actually was. There was some parental supervision. Like, some support and some insight as to how these girls developed into the ladies they were. Of course, in their attempt to make, you know, the characters more distinct, more changes were made to the characters. Jade did not return back to her athletic roots, but she at least showed interest in chemistry, something other than fashion, even if it was stereotypical for an Asian character, because all Asians are smart, and I mean they are, but they got other things too, other interests. And while Chloe maintained stealing Jade's sporty side from her, Chloe was stripped of her girlier and glam tendencies as well. So, fair game. And they gave her an interest in media and film, which, I mean, she was always interested in acting, but now she wanted to kind of be a director, look like. But okay, Yasmin was still the sweetheart, the journalist, and into music. Y'all know she's the darling of MGA, and y'all know why. So, of course, she didn't seem as interested in plants and animals, so no sweat, because she seemed more like the Yasmin from Starrin and Stylin in that universe. Sasha was a dancer, but made into more of a cheerleader, which was cool. Of course, she completely jacked Chloe's style with the glitter and animal prints. You know, I didn't like that they kind of made her stuck up and yet again the mad black woman without a compassionate side, but at least she had a personality. You know, I really felt like they took away Chloe's personality. Like, she was clumsy, but not dramatic, like she'd always been interpreted. She was kind of dry. And I don't know if it was, I mean, I don't think it was the actress. I think it was the writing. Like, Chloe was kind of quiet and dry and just, I don't know. She was kind of sporty but emo. Like, she was kind of emo. And I'm just like, this seems kind of weird. I mean, it was a different interpretation, but the characters were kind of changed and altered a little bit. In any case, the characters were developed more than in previous movies, and even in comparison to movies after. However, even this movie failed to review the full Bratz universe and analyze it to adapt it exactly. And I especially say this in the case of Cameron and Dylan. I don't know what it is about dog companies and flunking the boys. They just don't seem to know how to help this shine in a woman-driven universe, and it's sad. They don't know how to help boys shine, okay? Even with girls as the main character. Again, Cameron is supposed to be the blaze, the hottest boy around. Cameron was Meredith's simp boyfriend, a lame, a cornball in the movie. He was preppy and ultimately quiet for most of the movie. I think he only had a few lines. Like, where was the edgy, smoking hot boy he was at release? Back in 2002. You know, I swear the only media that ever got the Bratz right was the commercials. That's it. And Dylan. Whew. Let me come down before I go into this one. Whitewashing don't fly with me. Now, it can be implied that Dylan is biracial, but we know his behind got some black in him. There's no way he'd be wearing braids like that in Wildlife Safari if he wasn't, unless some cultural appropriation went under the radar. And his bronzer skin and the Play Sports line and Kidz line should be an indication too. So when I saw who they cast for Dylan in this movie, I almost asked for my money back. I don't support racism, colorism, or whitewashing. That's why I refuse to watch Ghost in the Shell and Avatar: The Last Airbender, knowing my anime behind would normally. Okay? Hey, I don't even like watching movies when they replace a white person with a black person. To me, it's just jarring. It's clearly fake. It's not real representation. And I don't think we should accept hand-me-down stories. We get saddled with the black version, not the version. Like we put a black girl Cinderella, she's called the Black Cinderella, not Cinderella. So hopefully the whitewashing thing is out of the water. We are past that decade, past that era. And if the Bratz are ever to be properly adapted live action again, we don't need a spoonful of whiteness to make the blackness go down. Okay? I don't want to see this again. And what makes it worse is finally Dylan was written with dimensions. He was more sensitive, caring, and they developed him into a character with hearing loss. But he had to be white in order for it to happen. It's kind of like what they did with Winx recently. And this is what I call disruptive representation. When you try to just force characters to change, to be diverse, and all you end up doing is creating a spiral effect where it actually ends up being worse. Instead of just creating all new stories with the diverse characters you want, you're going to take a line that or story that already pretty much gave you the format of diversity and then change it to be even worse. Okay? Like, it's like people feel like diversity has to fit neatly in a box. He can be black and deaf. He doesn't have to be black or deaf. You know, and that's now again, for biracial characters, it can be argued that a black or white character can play them. But why do we always choose white over black in these situations? This is exactly why Bratz The Movie couldn't get higher on this list. But ultimately, I can't blame whoever picked the cast. If they decided who would play the characters based on that Bratz TV series, it's no wonder they got it wrong. Because the only hint to his black heritage is the actor cast to play him. Though I'd argue that black people aren't a monolith and don't all look the same, and the casting directors should have known this and considered this heritage like they did all the other girls. Whew. Among the supporting cast, Meredith was definitely a delicious villain that we love to hate. She was probably one of the best characters. You know, she was pretty, funny, entertaining, and a great performer. And honestly, she was more fleshed out than some of the Bratz characters. Like, we actually see her home, her parents, her sister. We didn't see any of that from Cameron or Dylan. We barely saw any of that from some of the other characters. You know? Like, we never went into Jade's house. Like, we saw her bedroom. You know, we never saw her interacting with her parents. You know what I'm saying? We saw Yasmin interacting with her family in her house. You know, we saw Chloe interacting with her family in her house. We saw Sasha interacting with her family in her house. We never really saw Jade in her house interacting with her parents, like how dinners were, them asking her questions. We didn't see any of that. You know, we didn't see nothing from Cameron or Dylan. You know, however, I felt that Meredith's actions were more interesting than her motivations, if that makes sense. She was a great character, but really, why was she obsessed with keeping the cliques intact? Like, of what benefit was it to her? Like, at least in High School Musical, Sharpay wanted to continue to be the lead in the school play so she could have advantages in show business. And in Mean Girls, Regina George didn't even create the cliques. They created themselves based on people merging with others like herds of animals. Okay? You know, there were natural cliques in the school, and probably would have always been, because most people click off with people they get along with and are in after-school clubs or teams with. But we don't know why Meredith was obsessed with maintaining it as her duty. Unlike the character she's inspired by, because we know she's inspired by Mean Girls, Regina George, and High School Musical Sharpay, because that was a big thing at the time. But it's like the difference is there's nothing in it for her. And I can't see a character as rich and powerful as her caring about where people sit at lunch. Ultimately, I can only conclude that she had no real interest in maintaining the cliques. She just used that as an excuse to mask her jealousy of the Bratz and utilized the cliques to keep them apart because she feared they were stronger together than apart and that they would override her in popularity. Okay? You know, she was jealous that they received so much attention from the moment they walked in, and as student body president, they made her look bad, especially when they ignored her seating arrangements. You know, it seemed like the only reason why she was just voted in as student body president, and so she wanted to prove herself as a good leader, and so she organized the cliques and made sure they had their own seating table, I guess, so they wouldn't mingle. But then when the Bratz came in, they made her look bad because, I don't know, people wanted to be like them, and instead of her as a student body president, she was jealous, I guess. You know, but I still would have liked deeper insight to her mindset, though. Like, instead of a superficial display of a Sharpay Regina George mashup character, I would have liked the Bratz to actually get to the root of Meredith's behavior rather than taking her down on a talent show. I mean, the girl was clearly insecure, but the Bratz girls could barely understand when their friend Yasmin suddenly dropped out of the talent show, so I guess they weren't the types to analyze another person's behavior too well, even people they know very well. You know, I mean, Meredith was a mean girl, and that's all. I mean, some people feel there's no excuse for mean behavior, but I think the bullying would have been put to rest permanently if they had dug a little deeper. You know, because as we could tell by the end credits, she's still following them. She still seemed like she's trying to find a way to bring them down. So the bullying didn't stop. The stalking and the harassment didn't stop. And I think if they'd gotten to the root as to why she was acting that way, like, they could have prevented in the future. Like, you know, I mean, Yasmin talked to her and was like, why are you doing this? You seriously need to get a life. Like, she insulted her or whatever. But if she'd just been like, Meredith, why are you so bent on keeping the cliques? Like, what does it do for you? Like, why? What does it do for you? It doesn't make you more popular. It doesn't protect you in any way. What's the purpose? Like, I would have got to the root of that. But I mean, in the end, like, it wasn't even just Meredith that was problematic. Some of the Bratz girls' friends, I couldn't stand them. First off, yet again, Sasha, the black girl, is the only one left without a love interest. So that's a problem. And this is always how they depict black women. Like, we don't have a feminine side. Like, we're not capable of love. And we're sassy and independent. And this is always because we are not the ones on the team to help create these movies. We're not around to tell our stories. Black women, what other races of people like about us is that we're strong and sassy. But that may not be necessarily what we like about ourselves. We're multifaceted people just like everybody else. And I really wish they wouldn't do this. They did this with Claudine, who's kind of a black-ish character in Monster High 2. And while people can say, well, that just makes her queer, you know, why does this black character always have to be that? Like, why can't other characters of other races or appearances be that character? You know, and to me, that just is a way to invalidate our womanness and our femininity, and to make us feel more like men. And because people feel that the lighter and brighter you are, the closer to femininity, then the darker you are. And that's just not true. It's just not true. You know, but to be fair, I'm kind of glad Sasha didn't get a love interest in this movie, because the boys in this movie sucked. Like, Chloe's man made out with Meredith right in front of her. And while, yes, they technically were dating, he seemed to like it a little too much. Like, I would argue that Cameron was weak. Okay? He let Meredith control him and just followed her around instead of being his own person. Now, if we'd seen more of a story about it, about why he's letting this happen, maybe it would have made it more interesting. But sadly, I just felt like he was simping. Okay? And I didn't know why. Okay? And he was just straight. I can't even tell y'all what I really thought he was, because it wouldn't be appropriate. Okay? He was a straight. It would be appropriate. Okay? Dylan was whitewashed, so nothing about him was right. And Dexter, first off, he ain't even a Bratz boy, so I don't care to know him. Second, he was weak-minded too. When Jay decided to stand with her friends, he gonna threaten her, talk about some, if she can't hang with him and his friends, she can't be with him in a chemistry club. When Jay tells him not to be that guy, he firmly says, that's not up to me. The what? Like, what you mean it's not up to you? What, you're not in control of yourself, boy? You can't control your mind. You can't control who you hang out with. Who is it up to? Meredith got you whipped. After that, any chemistry Jay and him had went out the water for me too. Cause I shuddered when I saw Jay kiss him at the end of the movie. I'm like, no. He never apologized for that. He contributed to their misery. As far as I'm concerned, he was a bystander. And that's as bad as the person doing the bullying. He gave Jade an ultimatum, and when she didn't do what he wanted, he walked away. To me, he's showing how he will be in a real relationship. There are red flags there, my dear. So no, I could not stand him. He was fake, he was phony, and weak-minded. I can't. And I felt the same way about Sasha's cheerleader friend. Girl, bye. If you can't hang with us, then maybe you're not a fit. Nah, girl, your cheer squad ain't a fit. Because before Sasha jumped in, y'all was stiff and robotic. Bye. Anyway, though this movie showed more evolution for the Bratz characters in a lot of ways than the other movies, it was still attached to racial stereotypes, whitewashing, and weak-minded supporting characters. The visuals in this movie were on point. In fact, the visuals are the best part of this movie. It made this movie entertaining. The fashion. I swear I wanted every single outfit in this movie. And I mostly like androgynous fashion. I don't even look like this. Y'all know. I was too mad when there were no dolls released to tie in. When they finally released the signature collection, closeness happened. Like, basically only the white girl Chloe and racially ambiguous Yasmin, the favorites, were released. The actual Bratz The Movie dolls were nothing like the actual movie. There were implications from the Hollywood Holidays book that Bratz The Movie, was a movie made about the Bratz, not necessarily a real part of their lives or universe, so that could explain why none of the outfits appear in the Bratz movie line. However, I felt the outfits in the movie were better than the actual Bratz The Movie line. I was still pretty disappointed. And it wasn't just the outfits. Like, everyone was good looking and everything was looking good too. There was a grandiosity. It was kind of an exaggerated daily life. Like, the school was huge. Meredith's house was huge. The shopping center was involved. Like, the super sweet 16 was almost a literal circus. Like, the girls' bedroom was stylish. Like, each scene was pleasing to the eye and drew you in and told a story. The only visual I hated was Dylan. He spoiled the movie for me. It's not that he was ugly. It just wasn't Dylan. I wish someone passionate about Bratz and someone who knew the fan base and knew the dolls, were on board with this movie. Someone with the heart. Someone who really cared about this brand. People can be good writers. That doesn't mean they truly understand or feel what they're writing. The soundtrack game was pretty strong. Okay, some 2000s favorites were laced through the album, and some songs are so iconic they became a staple of Bratz, like Prima J's Rockstar. To this day, I love Brick and Lace's Love is Wicked to death. I've smashed that replay over 100 times. I also love the Bratz songs in the movie. Meredith's songs were amusing and entertaining too, and I would argue a bit better than that Bratz Bratitude song. Of course, All About Me, the second Bratz soundtrack song with this title, is pretty dated, as MySpace is a lyric and that is mostly a thing of the past. The Bratz music is more timeless and can be listened to later down the line. When I first watched the movie, I was disappointed in Bratitude as a final song. I don't know why. I mean, it was hype and everything, but it felt a bit sloppy. Like, they tried to add too many things to it. I mean, I understand they wanted to bring the school together, but it made the song's composition or the way it sounded a bit messy. I really didn't know where the song was going at first, but eventually I got used to it. But I understand why the Bratz only tied with Meredith. It did beat her. Now the song that played it during the ending credits, Open Eyes, now that was a bop. I would argue that should have been the final song against Meredith. They probably would have won then, but I guess it was more chill than hype. And they wanted a song that could get the crowd on their feet and the Bratz dancing. The stage was pretty epic in Bratitude, adding to the grandiose setting. So I think only a hype song could have fit. But I still preferred Open Eyes, and it only played during the credits. Overall, The movie was fun. It was flashy with the visuals. It was probably the closest to designer Carter Bryant's vision for the dolls. And it gave a little bit more evolution to the Bratz universe than all the other movies, giving them a family background and individual interests outside of fashion. But it was cliche, stereotyped all the characters, whitewashed Dylan, didn't include the universe everyone was hoping for, and didn't pay attention much to the details in the actual Bratz doll universe. Coming in next is Starrin and Stylin. Bratz the video, Starrin and Stylin. And calling it a video is showing its time. I first watched this movie at age 14, starting my first year in high school. The first Bratz movie ever. It was the first time the Bratz came to life on screen and were developed with an animated universe. Keep in mind though, there have been tons of other Bratz books fleshing out their universe before this movie. Another Japanese stop motion series overseas, the official website, which had given details about the characters and the Bratz dolls boxes themselves. But this movie was the first full-length animated movie. So here goes. The story, written by Meg Martin and Nora Pearson, follows the Bratz girls Chloe, Yasmin, Sasha, and Jade, along with friends Cameron and Dylan, as they prepare for prom weekend. Unfortunately, right before, the teacher gives them a big art project about expressing themselves due the Monday after prom. Fortunately, Yasmin comes up with an idea. They can do a video during their prom week and each do a segment from their own perspectives. Prom week is full of drama though. Chloe crashes a car with all of her friends nearly hurt. Sasha's been stressing over being head of the prom committee. Jade is panicking over losing her fashion sense because she's been, showing her friends fashions that they don't like. And someone has been leaking stories to the school newspaper, slamming the Bratz pack and making waves. Eventually, the Bratz girls discover that it's Yasmin who has been writing those things about them, and everything starts to fall apart in their friendship as well. Eventually, Yasmin is able to patch up with the Bratz and explain, they've been talking about how boring her column is, and so she wanted to spice things up. Once Yasmin began apologizing for hurting everyone, everything seemed to fix itself. Cameron finished fixing Chloe's car, they're able to find the perfect prom attire, and the video is almost complete. Though there was a slight snag when the prom caterers, photographer, and DJ didn't show up, the Bratz pack got themselves together to make sure it was a success. When Monday rolled around and they revealed their drama-filled video to the teacher, they all got A's on their video project. For me, the story was simple, slice of life, and interesting. It didn't need the fancy flash and dash to be good. There were many twists and curveballs, and it left me wanting to know what would happen. With a little more tweaking, the story could have been even better, but overall, it was a good start for Bratz. Now, remember the movie came out shortly after rival Mycene's jamming in Jamaica, so it had a lot to live up to. While it didn't have the world destination theme, it did attempt to capture the tween teen spirit and what average teens go through, even if it appeared a bit cliche, like much of the TV shows and movies back then, like Lizzie McGuire, Unfabulous, Zoe 101, Rugrats All Grown Up, As Told by Ginger. You get the picture. I believe it also captured Carter Bryant's vision of making them the cool girls in school, which I think was a unique take, different from the geeky girl in school. But, it wasn't exaggerated like in Bratz the Movie. I did wish the movie had explained in detail how they got their name, the Bratz. The movie really didn't even acknowledge that they had the name, which left quite a hole. My biggest criticism of the movie was that much of the story made some of the Bratz characters look bad, and for some people, no amount of apology could fix it, but that didn't really bother me, as I hate Mary Sue characters and I prefer characters to have flaws and imperfections. So speaking of characters, let's get into that. To me, this was the obvious weakness of the movie. Being the first movie, I was expecting them to bring to life all the qualities present in the Bratz universe, including Jade's love of extreme sports and her far out outlook, as outlined in the Bratz's first video game and on the official website, the 2001 website. Instead, they made Jade a one-dimensional character. They are responsible. This movie is responsible for introducing Jade as a one-dimensional character. Dramatic Chloe loved art and planned on being student body president. Quiet and shy Yasmin was interested in journalism. Sassy and hip Sasha was into partying and music. And Jade was just into fashion. cutting edge fashion, but just fashion nonetheless. None of the Bratz girls were sporty, so that was a bummer, but at least Jade maintained her way extreme and totally far out outlook. More than I can say about Bratz Rock Angel's take on Jade. Why would anyone like Jade ever try to work with Pink Your Thing? Why would a cutting edge girl... I just find more reasons to criticize Rock Angelz. Anyway, some of the characterizations in Starrin and Stylin made it difficult for the Bratz going forward, and I would say it began to be dated as the universe was trying to expand. First off, Yasmin was supposed to be a girl who just moved to town recently, and this conflicts with the whole Bratz Babyz and Bratz Kidz universe that followed after the movie. So it's hard to take the story seriously anymore. Second, Cameron was Kendall, permanently making him Chloe's love interest when everything from commercials to lines like Secret or Blind Date showed otherwise. What made Bratz different from Barbie was that they were all single and ready to mingle. They weren't owned by each other. They may have had crushes on each other, but they were friends first and recognized they were too young and independent to settle down. Even all the books based off of, these movies said that. Like, they had crushes on each other, but they knew they didn't want to mess up their friendship thing, and they had too much to live for. Second, Cameron was the blaze because all the Bratz girls thought he was hot, which means they all had a crush on him, not just Chloe. This allowed the Bratz to potentially be seen with anyone, opening up the possibilities of interracial dating, queer dating, and even friendship dates that led to nothing romantic. It actually made lines like secret date possible and fun. Barbie was settled with Ken and could never seem to shake him, even when she broke up with him and tried to come out as bisexual. Please, of all the pandering. Bratz never had that kind of pandering before until they Ken-dogged Cameron. Now, whenever the Bratz return, they only bring Cameron back so he can be the love interest to Chloe, giving him little evolution beyond his attraction to the girl. He's the boyfriend doll, not the boys. The Bratz boys were so much more than love interests before Starrin and Stylin. There were even books just about the Bratz boys. Starrin and Stylin ruined that, in my opinion. And Rock Angelz picked up right where Starrin and Stylin left off. Now, I'm not saying it's wrong to have a romance story, but when it's limited in this way, white boy ends up with white girl, there's no room for growth. What's worse is that only Chloe had a romance story, which added to her popularity and kind of made her bigger and more popular than everybody else, because for some reason little girls or young girls love romance. Chloe was the drama queen with all the personality and all the development, and honestly she was the most likable character in this movie. Okay, she had all the personality, had the romance story, was the only house we ever went inside of, and she was relatively likable. While all the characters of color, Jade, Sasha, and Yasmin, were made mostly unlikable. Jade was boring, Sasha and shallow. Sasha was bad-tempered and a control freak, and Yasmin was a sneaky backstabber. It was made obvious with the school newspaper, aka Yasmin, didn't even have anything bad to say about Chloe. Okay, even Dylan was made more unlikable than Cameron, though admittedly he had more personality. I was still hoping for, like a Slick Nick type of character, as implied by the nickname the girls gave him. If he was this corny, why would the girls even give him that nickname? But in the movies and series, it appeared that the boys gave themselves those nicknames, which conflicts with the back of their boxes where they say the Bratz call them this, meaning the girls. There's a difference. Pay attention. I wish some of these writers would pay attention to the details, but there's the conflict of creating your own artistic vision and trying to represent the Bratz brand. I get it. I just want a writer who really knows Bratz. I do. I can't help it. Okay, I can't. A lot of people used to come down hard on the Starrin and Stylin animation style. And while it may be cheap animation, it may be, I really like the 2D animation. No, it's not the fancy CGI, next-gen graphics or whatever, but it had character and heart. And the main reason why it was used was because of the animated characters present in the commercials. Before the movies and animated series, the only media providing a lens to the Bratz universe worldwide was the commercials. The animation style had the Bratz interacting with their surroundings, and it actually led to people asking for a movie about the Bratz using those animated characters. Unfortunately, it didn't seem to translate well into the movie in some people's eyes, but I liked it. the backdrop actually appeared like a real neighborhood, especially when I saw it recently. The coloring was luscious in some points, showing that the upper class suburbs that they lived in. And then it was dark and sinister at other points, like when they were lost in the forest, and thinking about how they were in the dark forest and how the sun was setting. It was just, and it just set the mood in ways CGI animation couldn't. Also, the backdrop or neighborhood was interesting because it appeared like an upper class suburb. And that's similar to Springfield, Missouri, Carter Bryant's hometown and the birthplace of the Bratz concept. Styles High even looks a bit like Kickapoo High School, the school of the students that inspired Carter Bryant's designs. So later, the Bratz TV series and CGI movies placed them in Stylesville, California, which was okay too. But I just like that little detail in Starrin and Stylin. It looks like it was inspired from Springfield, Missouri. It kind of has that feeling. I can't say for certain or confirm it, but it gave me that vibe. The music was pretty good. It's quite nostalgic. Summertime Girl was actually played everywhere in children's commercials back in the early 2000s. I remember it being played on Nickelodeon Slime Time Live back in the day, and even in the promotional commercials for the Kids' Choice Awards. I think it played during a New Year's segment too. Anyway, the music had this cool beach party vibe that I dug. Like most of it is iconic. Like I like to add that because of the DVDs, because the DVDs had the best features back in the day. Like they had features. The karaoke feature allowed us to sing along to these songs, making them more iconic. So I wish that there were even special features. Like now everything is streaming, but I kind of miss those like DVD features and bonus, games and bonus bonus episodes and things like that. I think that made watching a movie more enjoyable. I miss that. Overall, I miss that. So to sum it up, the gem of this movie is that it did need the fancy animation and world destination theme to be a good, engaging story with a twist. The animation was really beautiful in my opinion, especially when capturing the neighborhood and the houses. And it was cool to see the commercial animation get full length with voice actors. But of course, the downside is the writers didn't pay attention to the groove of the Bratz universe. They stripped some characters down to one-dimensional characters, made all the characters of color unlikable, and approached the first full-length film with simplistic storytelling, which didn't really wow the crowd. Coming in next is Super Babyz. Bratz Super Babyz. This movie was released in 2007, shortly after Bratz The Movie was released in theaters. I believe I was in my final year of high school, my senior year. Yeah. Written by John Doolittle, the story follows our favorite core four Bratz Babyz characters. They're excited to go to a superhero convention at an amusement park and are excited to meet their favorite superheroes from their favorite show. Of course, as little impressionable babies, they long for superpowers, especially because they believe they won't have to go to bed or be told what to do or whatever. The next day, while at the amusement park, a bunch of potato aliens who crash landed the night before gets one of his devices. They called it the matter exchanger, lost among the toys at a gift shop. When the Bratz get to that shop, their Nana accidentally buys it for them. Later that night, while they're asleep, Nana takes the toy, or matter exchanger, and accidentally presses the button on it thinking it's a remote, causing a shockwave through the house that ends up giving the Bratz girls power. When they wake up the next morning, they have super abilities. They begin using these abilities to save the people and animals in their community, but eventually start tiring out. The aliens who have come to who have come to Earth because they mistakenly believed that babies were worshipped on this planet, realize that the Bratz Babyz have taken their matter exchanger. So they scheme a plot to replace the babies while the babies are out saving the world. That was their scheme overall. So while they found out that the babies have the matter exchanger, they try to get it back, basically. And after they're able to kidnap Sasha and trick the babies, they're able to beat the Bratz home. I believe that's what happened. And then take the matter exchanger and then turn themselves into babies and then take the baby's place. But so the babies realize the aliens' plans and they seek to get rid of them. Then they soon learn that their own abilities as babies can help them save the day and that they don't need their superpowers. So they're able to trick the aliens into turning themselves into rats, getting them kicked out of the house, and in the end they're held as pets by a local worker, and the Bratz babies live happily ever after, being catered to by Nana as the babies that they are. Hope that makes sense. So when it was first released, I'm not gonna lie, the movie was kind of cheesy and forgettable, but I expected it coming from a movie told from the perspective of toddlers or babies. You know, I remember thinking to myself, the planet is being invaded by vegetable aliens. Okay, it wasn't until I got older that I appreciated it more, and maybe because I worked with 3 and 4-year-olds closer. What I found interesting about the Bratz girls becoming superheroes was the fact that they idolized the heroes, much like many of the kids at that time during the early superhero Marvel craze, and they wanted superpowers of their own. And what I like about the movie now is it teaches the lesson that kids don't need superpowers to save the day. It teaches them to appreciate being young while they still can and using their own young abilities to make a difference. You know, the babies wanted to be able to stay up all night and thought superpowers would give them the chance to do that for some reason, but they're babies. So but after getting them, they realized how much work it was to save the day, and when they realized their own favorite superheroes were fakes, it broke the illusion that a real hero has powers at all or wears a cape in spandex or whatever. You know, a real hero is someone willing to help others, and that message was actually a pretty good one. So I can say I appreciate the story a little more now than I did the first time I watched it. I feel like it had 2 messages. You know, you don't need to look like a superhero or have superpowers to be a hero, and appreciate being a baby while you can, because there are some potato aliens out there who would die to be in your place and be taken care of and catered to. I think it had those 2 messages. So you know, the inclusion of aliens, you know, isn't weirder than Genies and Pixiez, to be honest. I mean, the Bratz world is just weird. You know what I'm saying? It's just weird. When it came to the characters, you know, the movie stuck to the core 4, which was for the best, especially since they were the only ones in the line at the time, the Super Babies line. So the best part about this movie is that they gave Jade a little more dimension than in even the movies with her as a teenager. Like, sure, we only learned she was a really messy toddler, but it was still a little something more than she's just a fashionista, because again, they all are. You know, and so they kind of made Jade kind of messy. I think in the Bratz Babyz, the movie, they made her kind of accident prone because she hurt her hand, and then Miss Calabash thought she had another accident when there was some urine on the carpet made by the puppy. But it seemed like Jade was considered the messier, more accident prone one, and kind of Bratz Super Babies kind of played on that. So to me, it's a little more dimension than she's just the fashionista. Okay, but Nana is my favorite, and I'm still trying to figure out if she's a relative to Chloe, but her lack of vision and 3 pairs of glasses strung around her neck to help her see reminds me of my own grandmother. It's so funny. She has these 3 glasses, and she's like, Chloe, Jade, yeah, she can't tell them apart, and she switches between the glasses. I think she's farsighted and nearsighted. She switches between the glasses. But you know, my grandmother's like that. So Nana, I love Nana. But of course, the potato alien thing was kind of weird, you know, but it was mildly entertaining. Like, I don't understand why they chose potatoes as enemies. I think vegetables would have been perfect. Like, what is more of the natural enemy of a toddler than vegetables? Am I right? You know? But okay, I feel like vegetables would have been more clever, but visuals were okay. Good for the times. Of course, the potatoes had a really strange look to them. Like, I liked the detail, but when I was younger, the potatoes looked so weird to me, especially as babies. Like, it kind of creeped me out. Like, at least though the babies actually wore the right superhero costumes for the actual Bratz line and were all present in the movie. You know, of course, I'm still interested in the Super Babies artwork that seems so different from the line. Like, where does that fit in? But overall, the visuals didn't do much to improve the overall quality of the movie, you know, but it was decent. You know, it didn't help, but it didn't hinder the movie, in my opinion. The music, the songs on here were cute. pretty catchy. Like Feel the Power was a bop for a minute. I love We Can Win too. That has some soul to it. Overall, the movie had a cute story with a good message. Like, all of the characters from the line were in the movie wearing the right outfits, and the music was good. But the story was cheesy and forgettable, and some parts of the animation weren't too appealing. Next up is Bratz Baby Save Christmas. Released in 2013, I was definitely an adult by the time it arrived and aged 23. Basically way older than the target demographic. At the time, I was just excited to get anything from Bratz since there had been issues with the court cases and Bratz arriving back for the 10th anniversary. So this movie is close to my heart in that way. But there are other things I like. Of course, I don't think it's like the best movie in the Bratz universe, but there's some things that I like. The story, written by Girlz, I think Girlz is how you say the name, Girlz, Geurs, I can't pronounce the name, but they wrote the story, and the story centers on Bratz babies, Chloe, Jade, Sasha, and Yasmin, staying with their nana. And their babies have been excited by the return of their parents from a winter vacation just in time for Christmas. Unfortunately, their parents end up stuck in a winter storm, forcing the babies to spend Christmas Eve with Nana. Being babies and all, they're upset, missing all of their parents and family traditions. And Nana tries to do the traditions with them, to make their Christmas special, but the babies feel like it's not the same. So Nana takes them to see Santa, hoping it would cheer them up. The babies think it's a good idea because they get to ask Santa to bring their parents home. While there, three criminals, Max and his minions, Ralphie and Reggie, plot to dress up as a fake Santa and elves so they can pick the pockets of the parents in the shopping center. While Max is talking to his boss, who he apparently owes money to, the Bratz, mistaking him for the real Santa, misunderstand him, overhearing that he's had a lack of helpful elves. They believe he's canceling Christmas because he doesn't have help. Later that night, they learn on in the news that Santa is at a place called the North Pole, about to deliver a large donation to Summer House, a home for orphans, and they decide to visit it. Meanwhile, the three criminals hear about it too, and they head to the place to steal the money. Their boss, Millie, disguised as a security guard, also heads there. The criminals arrive first. While plotting to steal the key to the car trunk from the head elf where the money is hidden, the Bratz babies arrive. They offer to help the head elf, who appears to be running this North Pole. In order to distract them, Max sends his minions out, because he's in hiding at this point. And he sees the Bratz babies, they're still in hiding, and he sends Ralphie and Reggie out to distract the babies. Ralph and Reggie are much more sentimental about Christmas than Max, and with the Bratz, they prove to the head elf that they can be helpful elves to Santa. Eventually, Max is able to steal the key, and just as his boss Millie arrives, she has him lock the Bratz and the head elf up in the stables, and together with Ralphie and Reggie, they take the car with the money inside the trunk. The Bratz babies find out Max was a fake Santa, and even learn that the place they're in isn't the real North Pole. But the head elf tells them that he does work for the real Santa, and that the reindeer in the stables are Santa's real reindeer. Not trusting anymore, they almost lose hope for this Christmas. Outside and feeling guilty, Ralphie and Reggie hop off the car their boss tries to drive away, and releases the Bratz and the head elf from the stables. Ralphie, Reggie, and the babies all head out on the reindeer to stop Max and Millie. They're able to cut them off and have them arrested. The police are able to drive the Bratz babies home before Nana even notices they're gone. What they didn't know the whole time was that Nana had dressed herself up like Santa and was attempting to climb down the chimney so the babies would lose hope in Christmas and Santa like she did when she was a little girl. So while stuck in the chimney, Santa is able to meet her on the roof for the first time. Okay? I think the story is really cute. What I love most about the story, and was pleasantly surprised to see, was the time-old story of appreciating what you have. I think many kids and many adults miss what the holidays are all about, behind all the traditions and presents. Fortunately, I didn't grow up celebrating Christmas, so I never desired it or understood the compulsory need to give expensive gifts or stress yourself out cooking and throwing parties. I hated parties in my house anyway, because let's just say it was really stressful in my home. So I was thankful we didn't celebrate it. You know, I got rewarded when I did good. So I just didn't expect my parents to give me things. I was taught that money doesn't grow on trees and that everything you get should be treasured and taken care of and that you should earn it. What I liked about this movie was that the Bratz babies learned to appreciate making new traditions and seeing the silver lining instead of complaining about what they don't have. You know, they initially think it's the worst Christmas because everything isn't perfect, but they learn to be adaptable and make their own Christmas special. I still felt bad for Nana because she was trying her hardest to make things good for the babies, and obviously they didn't see how hard Christmas must have been for her. Like, they didn't seem to appreciate her efforts. You know, if you look around at Nana's house, she seemed to live in an old house all alone. You know, I've seen a picture of a couple on one of her tables. I'm not sure if it was in this movie or the Super Babies movie, but maybe she has children. But also, as we noticed, none of them were there on Christmas Eve either. You know, and I do wish that the babies had seen how happy they could have made Nana instead of thinking about how others could make them happy, you know. But I mean, overall, I felt the message was good, as with all the Bratz Babyz movies. Now, some things didn't make sense, as with many of the Bratz Babyz movies. When the Bratz Babyz and Ralphie and Reggie were chasing the criminals, I don't know how the head elf or the police were able to find them after they veered off the road. I mean, sure, the head elf could have used some magic to show up, and prior to veering off the road, the criminals almost run into someone, so maybe they called the police. And that's aside from a policeman chasing Millie all the way to the North Pole because she was driving above the speed limit in the movie. So, I mean, maybe the police had been trailing them all along. I don't know, but still, how could they have gotten there so fast unless one of them had been tailing them all along? I don't know. Maybe the head elf uses magic to notify the police. I don't know. You know, some people have trashed this movie and they find it stupid, but I actually like it, and I think it's cute, especially for a movie about dolls, especially babies, baby dolls. The story seems like a toddler told it and handed it to the writers. As far as the characters, I think the four Bratz girls were kind of drowned out in the movie, you know. They didn't display as much individuality from one another, you know, but, you know, none of them were made to be worse off than the other either, you know. They seem more united in this movie. But I felt like one person could have done the job. Because there wasn't much in the movie displaying their individuality. Well, maybe when it came to their individual Christmas traditions, I should say. But I would say they didn't cater to their individuality quite as much in this movie, especially because they had so many other colorful characters. However, the standout characters were the supporting ones, to be honest, particularly Ralphie and Reggie, who missed out on a childhood of toys and games because they'd always been bad. According to what they said, they've been bad since they were 4. So they had a longing for their childhood back, giving them kind of a Peter Pan syndrome and a sense of nostalgia, kind of like myself. And their evolution in the story was most entertaining, I think. Though the visuals weren't miraculous by this time, and I got used to CGI by 2013, I thought that there were many details in the background that added to the story. You know, for example, it's clear that the Bratz babies lived in a warmer climate, but as they moved toward the quote North Pole, suddenly snow started to show up in the background, and that was a pretty interesting detail to add, especially because a lot of kids in the West Coast and in the southern warmer climates don't get to see snow. So it was a way the Bratz babies could experience a white Christmas, and it was kind of gave a magical feeling that, you know, the closer you move to the North Pole, even if you live in a warm climate, you know Santa's around because snow will be around. It was kind of an interesting detail. But I would say that was the only interesting detail about the visuals. I did like those cute Bratz Babyz Christmas outfits, and kind of wish they were released, but they never were. So, at least I don't remember. Nope, they never were. Never seen those outfits. There wasn't much music, which was kind of disappointing. My favorite song from the movie, Feel the Magic, only played in the credits. There were 2 other cheerful Bratz Christmas songs that I like too. If you want to get in a Bratz Christmas mood, I think these songs would be perfect. You know, the best part about these songs is that they're distinct to this movie. So if you hear it anywhere else, you know where it came from. So I think these songs were really inculcated in the movie well, in my opinion. Versus just being any old random songs that could be in the series and the movies. You don't know why it fits in this movie. I just think the songs in here fit well. overall, it was a pretty cute movie with a good message, despite the wacky things that happened in it and the average visuals. Next up on the list is 2007's Bratz fashion Pixiez. I was 17 when this came out and in my senior year of high school. Dark Pixiez, light Pixiez, gnomes, magic, and Bratz. What could be better? What a lot of y'all may not know about me is I love fantasy, and I don't care what form it comes in. I was always into Peter Pan, Cardcaptor Sakura, Sailor Moon, Harry Potter, and much more when I was growing up. You know, I still love magic and mystery and dark fantasies with hidden messages. I mean, I've got my feelings about some of those shows now, like, you know, J.K. Rowling, I don't know, be side-eyeing her sometimes, but I still love the content growing up, and the magic and mystery always influenced me. Now, obviously, this movie came out around the height of Winx's popularity. Barbie Fairytopia was also hugely popular at this time as well. So this was the Bratz Pack's take on Teen Pixiez. So I was all in. Written by Bart Gennett, who I believe wrote some episodes of the Bratz TV series, Fashion Pixiez centers on a family of pixies who have learned to hide in plain sight from humans while helping the planet. Brianna, the youngest in a family of pixies, who happens to also be a fairy princess, notices that her older sister Cymbeline has been acting angsty. One day, Brianna follows her sister as she sneaks out and notices her sister sprouts wings and flies off. At school, the Bratz Pack, Chloe, Yasmin, Sasha, and Jade, are friends with Cymbeline, who happen to be in their same grade, and they have also noticed her behavior has changed. She was put in charge of the upcoming Magnolia Ball, hosted by Brianna's father, and always seemed to take school and her responsibility seriously. But lately, she hadn't been doing that. She hadn't been taking her responsibility seriously, and she's been shirking her responsibilities regarding the Magnolia Ball. So a new girl appears at the school, a gothic girl who dresses similarly to Brianna and Cymbeline, signifying some magical leanings and connection. Dylan becomes smitten with this mysterious girl despite Brianna's attempts at trying to ask him to the dance. I think he sees her as that young little freshman because she's younger than everybody else. So eventually this mysterious gothic girl is able to manipulate Dylan. She sees Brianna's interest in Dylan, and she utilizes to her advantage, because I think she shows interest in Brianna for her own aims, and manipulates Dylan, draws him into the forest, and then turns him into her slave. The next day, the Bratz girls try to visit Brianna at her house, and out of impatience, Chloe and Yasmin climb the gate in time to be confronted with angry gnomes and a flying pixie girl who they discover is Cymbeline. The day after that, Chloe and Yasmin try to explain to Sasha and Jade what they saw, but they don't believe them. So they confront Brianna and discover that Dylan, who'd been acting strangely, asked her to meet him in the forest. Yasmin and Chloe decide to go with her, finding the whole situation suspicious. When the girls enter the forest, they are ambushed, and Yasmin and Chloe are captured by Lena, who we learn the dark fairy's name is Lena, and her legion of dark fairies, with Brianna barely managing to escape. The next day, Chloe and Yasmin began acting strangely. They somehow emerged from the dark forest, and they begin acting strangely and dressing just like all the other pixies. You know, they have a bit of a tude, you know, being rude and shirking their Magnolia Ball responsibilities, just like Cymbeline have been doing. So this time, Jade and Sasha believe something must be going on, and they approach Brianna about it, who had been crying after Chloe and Yasmin were captured. And she confesses that she's trying to run away from her sister, because her sister and Lena are trying to get her. Brianna tells them about her family history, of them being the family of pixies or fairies, and of their mother disappearing years ago, or supposed to be 10 years ago. The book said 5 years ago, but okay. But she disappeared, leaving them only with magic charm bracelets and a wand. So she shares with them the world of the fairies through magical glasses or masks so that they can believe her. And she explains that her father is the fairy king and oversees the fairies who need to live in secret to help humans. She tells them they can't tell anybody. So she explains how her sister got caught up in wanting wings, which only sprout when you're 18 and only when you do a good deed. Cymbeline had wanted wings ahead of time, but their father refused. This led her getting connected with the dark pixie Lena, who had been leading a revolt against the king for 10 years, 5 years if you think about the book, and who offered Cymbeline wings of her own. Sasha, Jade, and Brianna eventually come up with, after she's able to, release her feelings, Sasha, Jade, and Brianna are able to come up with a plan to follow Cymbeline to a party she's going to deep in the woods. And if not Cymbeline, they know Yasmin and Chloe can't fly. So they said they'll follow them. But that kind of messes things up later down the line. But anyway, when they arrive there at the party, they find Chloe, Yasmin, and Dylan at a dark pixie club, a pixie circle, dancing under a spell. While trying to get Yasmin and Chloe out of a trance, they give their presence away. Lena tries to bring Brianna over to her side, needing Brianna's power to get stronger, but Brianna uses her mother's wand to put the club's lights out with magic, hurting the pixies, because it must have been some magic pixie dust, in that little, whatever, chandelier or whatever. So anyway, Lena uses her magic to cause the tree where the party was being held to collapse on top of the three girls, and she heads to the Magnolia Ball to take down the Fairy King. Using their cell phone flashlights, they navigate through narrow openings until a group of gnomes discovered them. The gnomes had been following them, so they were able to find them and help them. They brought their flying unicorns with them, and Brianna, Sasha, and Jade, while riding the unicorns, heads to the Magnolia Ball, and they confront Lena. Brianna's dad, the king of the fairies, faces off against Lena and is able to break some of her slaves out of their spell. He's weakened after this, though, as he tries to protect, the people, and as he tries to get rid of her slaves. And so for a moment, Lena has the upper hand. Brianna gathers her friends, her sister Cymbeline, and they discover that their mother has been turned into the magnolia tree in the center of the park. So they surround the tree, bring forth Cymbeline and Brianna's mother Dee, and together they overcome Lena and turn her into a tree. That's the gist anyway. So the story is pretty involved. On its own, it's a really engaging story. Like, Lena is one cool, seductive, and sinister witch fairy. And on its own, I love it. The whole family dynamic of a mother disappearing years ago due to a revolt led by a dark pixie, it makes for a pretty cool story. I mean, we've heard maybe a lot of stories like this before, or whatever, pixie stories, but it's a pretty cool story for a doll pixie story, okay? And throughout, there was so much mystery surrounding the whole thing. It was a lot of mystery surrounding the story, and it brought me in, and it made me want to know more. Like, I want to know more about this kingdom of the fairies, It was really fascinating. But unfortunately, that is only on the surface. If I look at this movie as being something that's supposed to promote the fashion Pixiez doll brand, MGA, what the heck were you thinking? Okay, first off, in the Bratz Fashion Pixiez line, Brianna, Lena, and Dee are sold as pretty teen pixies in this line. Okay? In the movie, they look almost as young as teenagers in their pixie forms. But actually, they're supposed to be adults. The problem is there is no indication on the boxes that Lena and Dee are meant to even be adults, and this causes confusion for kids during playtime. I've seen kids literally place Dee with Cameron thinking she's Chloe, or even Lena with Dylan not realizing she's a grown woman. Now, there have been other adult Bratz dolls, but the boxes clearly indicate that one is the mom doll and the other is a child. Without that indication, all of the dolls in Fashion Pixiez are assumed to be teenagers. Now, I can't come down on a young looking woman because everybody says I look like a 13-year-old. A lot of the times. I mean, sometimes. People start to say I look 18 at least, even though I'm 30. But, I mean, look at Ariana Grande. She still looks very young, though she's in like her, late 20s? But still, if you're going to have a young looking adult, okay, there should be some indication to the children playing with the dolls that that's what they are. Otherwise, problematic playtime could occur, such as the adult fairies ending up in fantasy weddings with teenage Bratz boys and Bratz girls, if you're queer, like me. Okay, and this occurs with kids who don't fully understand the Fashion Pixiez movie or never watched it. Okay, and that also brings me to another problem. Lena was technically an adult flirting with a teenager and manipulating him, making him her slave in this movie. I'm just gonna be real. That's problematic. That looks bad. I understand she looks like a young teenager forever, you know, almost like the vampires of Twilight who have lived for hundreds of years, yet are in a relationship with the lead girl who's a teen. But in the case of those movies, they kind of do a good job of making the vampires feel like wandering ghosts who remain the same age forever, especially since most of the time they never mingle with any adults or anyone older than 16. It's almost like they are still teenagers in vampire years. You know, Monster High uses this formula as well to give the illusion that they are still teenagers. You know, they say Draculaura is 1600 years old, kind of giving the illusion that that's 16 in vampire years. But with Dee being married, the only other female the same age or appears to be the same age as Lena, we can't use the illusion that they are teenagers in Pixie years, okay? Like they did with Monster High's Draculaura. Because, and we know Lena's older because the events that happened in the story happened 10 years ago. So we know, and Lena looked the same. So we know Lena is older 10 years ago. And I mean, she always looked younger than Dee. Well, Dee has a human form or a regular form, a disguised form. But I'm going to assume that Lena is older than the teenagers. Maybe she's not as old as Dee, but she's older than the teenagers. And so, because of that, because they broke that illusion by having Dee have children and be married, Dee was supposed to be a teenager too, but because they had her married with kids, that kind of broke the illusion that Lena is a teenager forever. It must not be a pixie thing. Because if Dee can grow old and get married, then that means Lena should technically be old too. And so, yeah, therefore we have to assume Lena was a full-grown adult woman preying on Dylan and making him her lover boy. And that wouldn't even be a problem. Because it could be a good lesson to give young people about being careful talking to strange adults and thinking they're in love with you and whatnot. But what's the problem is they were actually selling a doll based on this character. And then the character basically dies at the end of the movie, or is rather turned into a tree. So why sell this doll? Now, I've seen several people trying to theorize why the Fashion Pixiez doll looks so different from the movie version, you know, why she looks more innocent. Some people say they're selling a version of her that showcases her before she turned evil, but I call bull, okay? It's pretty obvious what happened. The dolls were designed first, and $1,001 they were all designed to be teenagers. The writers and producers of the movie were handed a handful of the dolls to write a story around, and they just wrote any old thing using the characters. They didn't think, oh, these characters are going to potentially be sold to kids, being perceived as teenagers. No. They thought, I have this really cool idea for like a pixie story, and I think I'll just use these dolls to tell it. Not even thinking, I'm going to have to GPA's going to have to sell these dolls to kids. Okay? Now, some of the other toys included in the line include like the Magic Mini Pixie Friends. They didn't even appear in the movie. So, overall, I can say that just says to me there's little to no connection between the Bratz Fashion Pixiez doll line and the Fashion Pixiez movie. It literally is its own movie in its own right that has nothing to do with the Bratz doll universe. And that's fine and everything, but it's like, it's poor promotion of the Bratz Pixiez fashion line, which is the whole purpose of the movie. Okay, so while the story is very interesting and one of the best in the Bratz universe, honestly, it fails to actually capture the Bratz universe. And it does it kind of in a negative way.
So, thinking about the characters, the primary Bratz Pack characters' personalities carried over from all the other movies, but I felt that Jade and Sasha were interpreted better in this movie. It was interesting that Chloe and Yasmin were the compassionate girls who impulsively jumped in to help Cymbalin,
Cymbeline, and that Sasha and Jade were the clear-headed girls who actually saved the day. So there wasn't as much emphasis on their individuality, but I felt it wasn't needed. I do still feel they lean towards making Sasha more selfish than everyone else, especially when Jay suggested they go to the dark pixie party to save their friends, and Sasha was over there more worried about the Magnolia Ball. Like, okay, this is not to say black characters have to all be perfect, but I just feel like the darker skinned characters are never structured as sweet or kind like the white or racially ambiguous characters, and it hurts the dark skinned characters in the long run. If there'd been more black representation, like in the Bratz TV series or in the movies, like with Felicia or Lydia making an appearance, then I'd probably be okay with Sasha being who she is. But with her being the only one representing the darker skinned girls, I wasn't happy that she was written less likable, especially considering how little she appeared in the lines after the TV series and how little black characters are received in general. But overall, the characters weren't so difficult to handle in this movie. Once again, though, they made Dylan a cornball, more interested in Lena, a grown woman, than Brianna, someone around his own age. I mean, she's probably just like 2 years younger than him. You know, but as soon as Dylan showed interest in Lena, I felt that Brianna should not have tried to ask him out. Like, once somebody shows you who they are and what they want, listen to them. Because at the end of the day, even if he were to get with Brianna, he'd be looking for the Lena in her. That's what caught his attention. So I really felt bad for Brianna because, you know, they made her seem so desperate for his attention. And he just didn't see anything in her until Lena turned out to be bad. She was his second choice. Just saying. Dee was an interesting addition as a mom and married character. Can't believe that little thing popped out 2 children, but okay. And it just feels kind of weird to think the doll D is even married, because in my mind all of the Bratz Pack characters should be in open, friendly relationships, you know, with mild crushes, you know, but an emphasis on independence. But okay, y'all ruined that too. Overall, though, each character played their part in making the movie itself good. If I wasn't seeing this as a Bratz movie, it'd be more enjoyable for me. But as a Bratz movie, I didn't like the character. Some of the characters are just like, ugh. The visuals are pretty amazing, not gonna lie. All the magic, fairy dust, flapping wings, it was all pretty amazing, especially for 2007. I feel like most of the story took place at night. And considering Lena was in town, the weather did seem mostly cloudy, like a shadow had clouded over the city, kind of like Genie Magic. The Genie Magic feeling. And I think it was considered drab until Jade and Sasha put on the fairy glasses mask and saw the world in color. So there was supposed to be a contrast to the everyday drab dreary world that they live versus the world of the fairies. And I thought that was artistically laced within the movie. It's not revolutionary or anything, but I like when it's done in movies. And so I like when it was done in this movie. And of course, I was very happy to see the prototype Pixie outfits in the movie, since they couldn't make it on the dolls. And they look just as amazing as I imagined it to be. Still, I think the prototype should have been released as special editions, but hey, beggars can't be choosers. The best part about this movie is that the songs from the Fashion Pixie soundtrack actually appeared in the movie. I believe they heard the complaints from back in 2005 with Rock Angelz and started fixing it ever since with the other movies. One of a Kind and Look Closer are my favorite songs, so it was great to hear them in the movie. I love the modern pop feel, but they also had this mystical, magical quality. It was great. It was great. And I'm glad they actually put it in the movie. Overall, I love the movie's story. It was full of magic, mystery, excitement, thrill, family drama, and family togetherness. It was very fun and had its touching moments. The story drew me in, and I actually would like to know more about the Kingdom of the Fairies. Would have liked a sequel, but not dealing with what they did with these characters. But I love the visuals, and the music took me there. So, but it was not a good adaptation of the actual doll line, and it made things problematic as a fan of the dolls. I wish Lena and Dee had been developed into the teenagers they were meant to be, or at least Lena wasn't as problematic, so I can enjoy having the Lena doll a little more. Higher up on the list is Bratz Genie Magic. Released in 2006, earlier in the year before Passion for Fashion Diamondz, I was still a sophomore and almost 16 years old. Man, time flies. Written by Peggy Nichol, the writer who wrote the Bible of the Bratz series and oversaw it, the story follows the story of teen Genie Katya. She escapes from her home, the ESA headquarters, and heads to Cafe Mambo, where she meets the Bratz for the first time. Mesmerized by the Bratz girls' music, she meets them backstage. The Bratz girls find her intriguing and like her outfit, but a famous celebrity, Matt Rock, distracts them as he connects with Jade, who has shown romantic interest in him all night. When a bouncer enters backstage looking for Katya, who didn't pay to enter, Katya uses her mysterious magic to escape. The next day, the Bratz girls meet back up with Katya and discover that she's being chased. They're willing to protect her and hide her, but discover that she's run away from home to live life like a normal teenager, and that her father sent some goons to bring her back. Though the Bratz believe she should talk to her father, they agree to give her a real teen experience, and they organize a sleepover at Chloe's house. I guess they kind of learned that she said she was in a science facility, okay? And she's lived there her whole life, kind of being homeschooled, never going to a real school, okay? So they agree to give her the teen experience. So while they're at Chloe's house, Bratz boys Dylan and Bryce attempt to crash the party, which frightens Chloe, and she ends up wishing that they would croak. Katya misinterprets this to mean that Chloe wants them to turn into frogs, and so she grants the wish. At first, the other Bratz girls can't believe what they've seen. Katya explains she's a genie, granting one wish for each person until she's 18, and expressing the limitations of not granting eternal life, more wishes, immense wealth, or something harmful. Of course, there are loopholes through this. More on this later. After the Bratz boys wish for themselves back, the Bratz realize they have a new genie friend that can help them with their troubles. Chloe is trying to get an A in geography, Sasha is trying to win the DJ contest, Jade is trying to score a date with Matt Rock, and Yasmin wants to have an animal shelter built to protect the animals from the crazy weather that's been lately affecting the world, including Stylesville. Because Chloe has already used her wish, Katya agrees that the girls can share 3 wishes. Anyone can make the wish at any time, and she won't have to be present for it to come true. Unfortunately, this causes an argument between the girls as they try to decide whose wish should be made. In the midst of this, Bryce asks Katya on a date, which is her first time going out with a boy. While in the shopping center, Katya continues granting the wishes of people around her, gaining the Bratz pack's admiration. They shop with her for some outfits similar to hers before she goes on her date with Bryce. While out with Bryce, she catches the goons watching her and abruptly ends her date to find her new friends. As she gets closer to the Bratz pack, whose arguing is getting worse, they catch sight of their friend running from the goons. They try to help Katya, but she is caught, and so she just reassures them that she's going to talk to her father. Back at the facility, which is a science facility located on a boat in the middle of a body of water, her father is angry with her for leaving, wearing makeup, and hanging with boys. He refuses to listen to her, causing her to be upset. At this facility, we learn that Katya is working with a man named Khan and his partner Zell to improve weather conditions or natural disasters. She believes she's helping, so does her father, who has decided to dedicate his life to science since he lost his own powers after his genie bottle was broken. But actually, Khan and Zell are a part of an evil scientist association that is using Katya's powers to create dangerous weather conditions around the world so they can squeeze money from the world's governments. Eventually, Katya overhears their plans to harm her friends because they know of Katya's powers, so she escapes again to warn them and help them. Khan and Zell send their goons, and they reach Chloe and Yasmin before Katya can, kidnapping them. Katya manages to reach Bryce, Jade, and Sasha. Unfortunately, Sasha makes a wish for an umbrella due to the crazy weather conditions, leaving them all with only one wish left. When they arrive at Chloe and Yasmin's, they realize they've been kidnapped. They realize the 2 girls have been kidnapped. Byron Powell enters the broken-into home, and he begins to tell them more about Khan and Zell. Now, Byron Powell is not just a reality show judge. In the series, they find out he's also an international spy. So, he's recruiting the Bratz once again to help him. Like he did in the series, and I think in some other movies, but he's recruiting them to help him keep Katya safe. So Katya realizes she's been helping criminals. Byron asks Jade and Sasha to protect Katya. Jade, Sasha, and Bryce to protect Katya. He gives Bryce one of them little wire gadgets. But Katya is adamant about protecting her father, so she convinced them to come with her back to the facility. On split magic carpets, Bryce, Jade, Sasha, and Katya return to the facility to find her father and their friends. They discover her father has left and is out looking for Katya. While they are looking for their friends and her father, because they don't know that her father has left, the facility, but they do know that father is no longer to study. But while they're looking, Khan and Zale have given a truth serum to Chloe and Yasmin to find out what they know. And then they start to prepare a mind sweep so Yasmin and Chloe can become mindless minions like their goons. Fortunately, Katya, Bryce, Jade, and Sasha are able to arrive just in time to save their friends, though Zale, who's been issuing the mind sweep, escapes. As Khan enters to warn Zale about the Bratz, he realizes Zale is gone and that the Bratz now have the upper hand. He takes Katya's bottle out of his jacket, which he stole from her room, and which he knows she needs to keep in order to maintain her powers. Otherwise, all of her wishes will be undone. The Bratz take this opportunity to wish for Katya's father to be back safely in his study, their final wish. What they don't know is the study is rigged with a trap that can freeze him to death. So with all three of the Bratz wishes gone, they feel trapped. And now Khan has the Genie bottle too. So Katya's powers are at stake. So there's a possibility no one will be able to make any wishes to save her father. Okay? Now Bryce steps in at this moment using his new gadget wire comb rope that Byron gave him and catapults it around or flings it around Khan's legs. And dropping him to the floor. Katya is able to step forward and grab her own bottle right before it smashes. But she realizes in order to save her father, she has to sacrifice her own powers. So she ultimately smashes her bottle, causing every wish she ever made to be undone. Khan is able to escape at this time, and he attempts to lock all the Bratz in the room by breaking the entrance pad. Jade, Sasha, and Katya manage to escape just as the door closes for good, or closes firmly, locking the other Bratz in. And as Khan heads back to his office, Zale knocks him out and handcuffs him to a pipe on the wall. She has been tired of his patronizing ways towards her and turns on him, stealing all the money. As soon as the Bratz catch up with Khan, they realize that he has been overcome by Zale. The Bratz head to the roof to try and stop Zale. Using their teamwork and clever ideas, they're able to take her laptop holding all the money. Jay did her thing, hopping into the helicopter, sliding out of the moving helicopter, not knowing if she would make it. Child. So anyway, they crash her helicopter, thanks to Katya and Jay distracting her with the split magic carpet and Sasha using an excavator truck of some sort. Though Zale gets away, Khan is taken in by Byron, and Katya and her father are reunited, deciding to live a normal life. The story is very involved, and personally, as the third movie in the Bratz universe, it was a vast improvement from the first two fumbles. First off, the story actually focused on the Genie magic line and the concept as a whole. Katya was used in majority of the movie. It had a clear purpose and actually was the first time a Bratz character was interpreted with a family, with parents. Though it wasn't the core four characters, it was a start. I also thought a story centered on a teen genie was so unique at the time. There have been a lot of teen shows about witches like Sabrina the Teenage Witch and ones about teen fairies like Winx, but none about teen genies. Not too many. I don't even remember any. So I thought it was a unique spin on the Genie story. I would have even liked a series centered on just Katya. She would make a good lead character because she has a family background and more adventures to tell with her Genie powers, though she unfortunately loses it at the end of the movie. Kind of. Now, again, the story was missing the whole Bratz Genie magic landscape, just like most all of the other Bratz movies. Megan, who'd been a part of the main Bratz Genie magic line, was missing from this movie, and that bothered me. I would rather have her than Dylan or Bryce. I mean, I understand a Bratz boy was used so Katya could go on her first date like a, quote, normal teenager. Clearly I wasn't normal because I didn't date in high school, so. But there's no excuse for them ignoring Megan time and again, okay? Regardless of her inclusion in the line, the movie was pretty entertaining. It was exciting, magical, fashionable, and fun. I just wish Megan was in the movie. Like, I'm just like, where's Megan? Why y'all messing Megan? Okay, so I can't really take the movie seriously as canon because it ain't got Megan in it. Okay, so I found it interesting that, you know, though Katya can't grant immense wealth. So this is something I was actually noticing. I'm just going to jump off real quick. I found it interesting that though Katya can't grant immense wealth, she was able to grant the wish of a passerby who said he wished he had a dime for every time his girlfriend asked if she was fat. Okay. Also, though she can't grant any wish that harms others, Zell and Khan were able to use her wishes for harm by lying about the circumstances of the wish. So this is the loopholes I was talking to you about during the story. So she said, I can't grant immense wealth, because Chloe asked, can I would have asked for $1 million. She's like, I can't grant immense wealth. But the guy who said, I wish I had a dime for every time you said you was fat, that dime could have added up to $1 million. You see what I'm saying? And even though she can't directly grant the wish of someone harming others, Khan and Zell were like, we're helping the environment. So Katya made the wishes come true. So I wonder if the regulations that Katya put out there are controlled by Katya herself, like her own regulations, or are they like Genie terms written in some Genie book or something? You know, because usually if those are your terms, like I can't, you know, cause immense harm, and the magic automatically grants the wish, then that means usually the magic knows that whether the person's intentions are bad, right? So they'll be like, I want the weather conditions to be immense storms and lightning in France because, you know, they're having an electrical problem. Does the magic suddenly stop on its own when it learns that the intentions are bad, or is it that Katya can make the choice on her own? Because if it's bad, she can be like, oh no, that I cannot grant. But if she thinks it's good, then yes, that she can grant. And then what are the consequences if she does grant a wish that are not based on her regulations? Because she seemed to have done that a lot throughout the movie, yet there was no real consequences. So I don't know why she's not able to do that at all. It was kind of confusing in that way. But anyway, unlike most Genie tales, it appeared as if Katya was in control of the wishes she could grant, and that the real issue was that she was largely manipulated by people into making wishes happen. So her real issue seemed to be not knowing if people really liked her for who she really was, but for what she could do for them. And just an observation of mine. The main 4 Bratz characters had been interpreted much like they had been in Rock Angelz, but I'm glad they brought out Jay's more extreme tendencies. She didn't show any reservations when she hopped on that helicopter. I'm just saying. And then while fighting off Zell in a moving helicopter, girl used her acrobatic skills on the goon. Like, she grabbed him by the ankles, girl. She was like, flip, ankle drop. You know what I'm saying? And then she grabbed the laptop, falling to her death before being caught by Katya on her flying magic carpet. If that isn't way extreme and totally far out, I don't know what is. And I wish they maintained that element of Jade throughout the series and the movies, because they seem to forget who she was. They forgot who she was. The other Bratz characters maintained their dramatic, tough, and superior attitudinal streaks, which weren't bad because they all learned to set aside their negative qualities to help their friend Katya. Now, Bryce was a surprise visit. Now, prior to the movie, it was assumed he was romantically involved with Megan, though there has been evidence she's been interested in Nevra too. But based on the secret blind date adverts, that was implied. So many people didn't know how to feel about the Katya Bryce interpretation, unless all you watched was the movies and shows. But as I've said, I've always seen the Bratz as independent creatures who have crushes on a lot of people. They have crushes on each other, but they just don't settle down. So they're independent, okay? They don't need to be owned by someone else, or in what you call a power couple. They don't have to be settled. So it's all good. We don't all crush just one person in our lifetime, especially as a teenagers, you know. So Bryce's appearance was altered a little bit, and it was really altered because they added a pair of glasses to him. That's very interesting. He was one of them. They basically took one of the background characters and called him Bryce, because I know he was one of them characters that kind of been an Easter egg, and so they kind of took that character and called him Bryce. Dylan was yet again a cornball. Whatever, cornball without any layers or development. Whatever, I guess he's comic relief. And then without Megan, this female dynamic was incomplete. I'm sorry, the female dynamic was incomplete. So Katya was fully developed in comparison to the other Bratz characters, I feel. You know, she had a backstory, a family, and a reason to have a passion for fashion. And I think after Katya, though, the parents are super strict thing was kind of used overboard, like with Sheridan and Jade and Bratz the Movie. Like, the parents are super strict thing was overused. However, what parents wouldn't be strict with the Bratz? Because they do seem quite rebellious, even to real parents, okay? So, I mean, thinking about that fact, Katya was probably the most developed Bratz character, period. What I also noticed is that they tried to weave her into a Moroccan character. Initially, it was pretty obvious Katya was meant to be Russian. Back in the 2000s, on the Social Security name database, Katya was a name most common in Russia and hardly even used in the USA, and not at all in any Arabic or Middle Eastern countries. But to give Katya more of an Arabian Nights feeling, to utilize her for this Arabian story, they developed an Arabic background for her. Now, it's still possible for her mother to be Russian, as there hasn't been much information on her mother. But we know that she was supposed to be Russian when she was released in the Bratz holiday line in 2005, a year before this movie was even released. And again, she's going through the same problem as Roxy, messing up the timeline, okay? They have her written in as a new girl, but she's been around at least a year before this movie was even released. And she's got a Bratz Babyz doll, which, how? When they just met her in Bratz Genie Magic. So, that's a problem, okay? So, I felt they should have already made her a friend to the pack instead of the new girl. Again, I don't know any doll brands who introduce old characters as new ones in their media content. They usually introduce an all-new character to fulfill this role because they know the doll community won't know the character and will be excited to get a new character and a new doll, increasing the likelihood of the purchase of that doll. Katya's had other dolls before Genie Magic, like Holiday Katya and Hollywood style Katya, and they were just as beautiful as Genie Magic a year later, and some could argue even better. So what's the pull? If they were ever to make a movie based on the holiday dolls or Hollywood style, it would be weird for it to take place after the events of Genie Magic. It's just, I guess you can have a doll without having ever met the Bratz, but it still leaves more questions than answers. But okay, they can do what they want. It just doesn't make sense in the Bratz doll timeline. That's all. The outfits were so beautiful in this movie, and it kind of lit up the scene. Like, throughout much of the movie, it was gloomy, dark, and rainy. So the bejeweled outfits, the colorful bejeweled outfits kind of stood out against the backdrop. And in fact, I liked, the literal artistic vision of it. You know what I mean? Literally. The CGI was actually pretty sharp for the time. Again, with the hair having movement and the outfits, being really well crafted and detailed on the characters. However, I did notice that they put Yasmin's outfit on Sasha and Sasha's outfit on Yasmin like they did in Rock Angelz. Luckily, Yasmin and Sasha look different enough from one another that there's no way we can confuse them, unlike with Jade and Chloe in the Rock Angelz movie. But it is jarring when you're looking to buy the doll and she's wearing a totally different outfit. This was the first time the music from the album actually appeared in the movie. Now, some of the music from the album was from the TV series, fine, but it is important to have some of the music appear in the movie, especially if the album was released first. So it was expected that it would set the tone for the movie. So I was really glad that it occurred. They fixed that, okay? They fixed that from the Rock Angelz era, but unfortunately, the music wasn't full of the same storytelling that Rock Angelz album had. And it could be put in any episode and movie and be acceptable, But I was happy to hear some songs laced in the movie. It gave a Genie-like vibe, okay? That's what I would say. Overall, the movie was magical, mystical, action-packed, and visually stunning. Some favorite music numbers were put in, showing the complaints about Rock Angelz were heard. It was cool to watch a movie about a teenage Genie. I wish they could have inculcated the Bratz Genie Magic line a little more closely, with Megan included, and have even considered Katya's status or place in the Bratz pack by the time the movie's release. Other than that, it was a really good movie. In the top 5 is Passion for Fashion Diamondz, released September 2006, surprisingly the same year as Bratz Genie Magic. They were really working hard. I was 16 years old and just started my junior year in high school, so that's what I remember. Written by Jana King Kalichman, I think that's how you pronounce Jana's name. The story follows the Bratz as they are recruited by Byron Powell, a famous reality show judge, and the parody version of Simon Cowell in the Bratz universe, to travel across the USA, visiting 3 cities to find the next teen fashion designer before rival magazine Your Thing. 3 girls are expected to be chosen by each magazine and taken to New York City to put on a fashion show in a sort of contest. The winner is said to win diamond boots and a contract with a famous fashion designer. As the Bratz Pack and Your Thing travel throughout the USA, they're met with all the road trip drama, such as old ghost stories about hitchhikers, lonely diners with strange waitresses, and aliens. On the way, the Bratz pick up one contestant named Mandy, who makes sure she's the only one. She frames Tiffany, one of the Bratz Pack's other choices, and has sabotaged Your Thing. When Your Thing retaliates, leading the Bratz off the road, they meet Sheridan, who they discover is a shy but gifted designer. Though her parents are initially apprehensive, they allow her to follow her dreams. Intimidated by the competition, Mandy steals Sheridan's designs and the tour bus and heads to New York by herself to steal the show. Fortunately, Sheridan's parents assist by offering their daughter their car. While headed after Mandy to New York, the Bratz discover that all the road trip scares were concocted by Byron Powell for higher ratings on the show. Though they're disappointed in him, they continue on to make sure Sheridan's dreams come true. When they arrive at New York, they've realized that Mandy has passed off Sheridan's fashions as her own. They encourage Sheridan to use her design skills to make the studded designs they saw back on her farm. When Sheridan is complete, voila! They are shining like real diamonds. Sheridan wins the competition. Mandy isn't having any of it, so she knocks Byron out as she tries to bring the diamond shoes to Sheridan. Or as he tries to bring the diamond shoes to Sheridan, I'm sorry. And then she makes a dash for the New York City runway. So the Bratz chase her, but she's slick. Okay, Sheridan is able to cut her off, but she dangerously walks the tracks to escape Sheridan, almost putting them both in harm's way. Eventually, the Bratz are able to cut her off from leaving the subway, with the police running, with Byron Powell to arrest her. Okay, the Bratz are awarded by the famous fashion designer with a photo shoot wearing his new Ice Champions or On Ice fashions, and they live happily ever after. And what became of Your Thing? Birdie went batshit crazy after being abducted by the fake aliens planted by Byron Powell. The Twinkles ran away, her only contestant, and so they failed to impress anyone on the runway in the contestant's place. And so the Bratz overcame and beat Your Thing too. So the end. Okay. So personally, I loved the story. Growing up, every summer my family went on a road trip from one state to another, and we've had some adventures. Okay. One day I would love to travel this large, great country, the USA. It's great in its own way. Even more. So visually, there's a lot to see here. Yes, social and politically, it's not always the best, but visually there's a lot to see. And maybe one day when the situation is better, I'll get that opportunity. But I personally love road trip movies and stories of spooky situations on the road. What was great about this movie is that it was full of adventure, suspense, shady western characters, action, and fashion. Now, though some moments were predictable, it never seemed like they tried to hide the intentions of most of the characters. So it's like they wanted you to be able to predict the end. So we knew that everyone was shady. We just didn't know when everything would blow up. And so it's a really fun movie. Now, the one thing I did question was the fact that these teenage girls were driving a truck or a trailer, I think it is a trailer, right? Because I think it's been called that in advertisement. So anyway, the Bratz are from California, and California law states that any trailer that is over 20 inches long or over 10,000 gross vehicle weight, or GVW, requires a CDL. In order to drive it across state lines, they would have to be 21 years of age or older to receive the proper license. The Bratz are nowhere near that age, at least as far as I know. So it's just a slight hiccup. But hey, what's the fun if you think of all the details, right? Overall, the idea of 4 teenagers taking a road trip by a rolling runway is just fun, and it's cool that there was a doll-sized version. So I was thinking possibly maybe they faked their age, or Byron pulled some strings to get them driving across state lines, or maybe they were just breaking the law on live television. People overlooked it. Because I believe you just have to be 18 to drive within the state. Maybe the Bratz were reinterpreted as 18 and they just happened to drive across the state line, stretching the law a bit. You know, just a bunch of outlaws they are. Anyway, it didn't take away my enjoyment of the movie. I really liked the quirkiness and spontaneity of the characters. You know, the core 4 Bratz Pack members were the same as usual, but they didn't really focus on individualizing them. Dramatic Chloe was her same usual self the most, and it made for an entertaining time. The Tweevils and Berdine had me dying most of the movie, and when they threw in, what's her name, Christy, it was even more fun. Mandy was something else, okay? She was a delicious villain. And of course, I was happy to see the development of Sheridan. Since Sheridan was first introduced in Passion for Fashion and Diamondz, you know, they finally made the new doll the new girl. Not some old-time doll that they suddenly tried to make a new part of the pack. And this was before Fashion Pixiez. So, of course, I would have liked other characters from the line to appear, such as Vanessa, Katya, and Fiona, because they were actually in the Bratz Forever Diamondz line in the fashion design sets. But, you know, I kind of felt, you know, Fiona appeared in the movie as Tiffany too. But anyway, it would have been nice to actually have them there. But the girls from the main Bratz Forever Diamondz line were present, so it was all good. But I do want to point out that even though Sheridan was introduced in the Passion for Fashion Diamondz movie, we do want to acknowledge that they released the Bratz Babyz for Sheridan. And so again, that messes kind of with the timeline a bit, because it was a Forever Diamondz Sheridan Babyz edition. And we can argue that, you know, just because she was in the Babyz line doesn't mean she knew the Bratz at the time, and that's an argument to make. But again, that raises eyebrows when Sheridan appears in the Babyz universe and we're being told that she's meeting the Bratz for the first time. So that's just something that I wouldn't say it stopped me from enjoying it, but it just kind of was, it irked me a little bit. Like, it kind of hard, it makes it hard to take the movie as canon when it deviates from the doll universe. It's just my opinion. And another thing I didn't like was when the Bratz Pack members tried to give Sheridan a makeover, and they did that by taking off her glasses and changing her clothes. Now, you know, they should have, I felt like that was giving the wrong message. So when they were like, Sheridan, your makeover time, they took off her glasses. I mean, she wore her own outfit, so I mean, that ain't bad. But when they took off her glasses, I feel like they should have helped her feel confident the way she was. She didn't need to change her outfit to feel more confident. And as someone who doesn't let anyone take off her glasses, I rock my own style with them on. So I felt a bit funny about that. But, you know, considering Sheridan really wanted to wear her own fashions, I guess that's fine. But they didn't need to take off her glasses to do that. And the fact that they even put Sheridan in glasses in the first place when she was never advertised that way kind of blew me. But, yeah, I just don't think that they should have encouraged her to take them off. Like, she needed them off in order to be a more attractive girl or a more fashionable girl, because she really didn't. And I just didn't like that aspect of the movie. Okay, the dusty roads weren't glamorous, but, you know, it really set the mood. You know, long stretches of road and totally isolated. That's how I felt. You know, that's how it felt. And they really captured it, I think. I think they captured the dusty roads of the West, in my opinion. Because it seemed like a little Western thing, you know, road trip, like Cars. Y'all remember the Disney Pixar movie Cars? It's kind of like the dusty roads and the long, expansive land. It set the mood, okay? And it made it all the better when they reached New York City, and you can see the contrast from the dusty roads to the big city. And then when they walked down the runway in the diamond-studded outfits, it contrasted the long road they'd overcome, okay? It was kind of like, I went through a long, hard, difficult, dirty, muddy road, and I made it this far, and now I'm shining like diamonds on this glamorous luxury runway, okay? So it was refreshing to have the Bratz leave Stylesville too, and have a totally different setting for most of the whole movie for once. That was also pretty refreshing, where they were mostly
not in Stylesville, not even for half the movie. So that was pretty good. Also, I was so happy the Bratz Pack were wearing their own outfits, and it was great to see the prototypes with the original words on the tops. So gotta give it to the visuals. There wasn't too much music, surprisingly, but the three main songs that appeared from the Forever Diamonds album, Just Having Some Fun, You Got It, and Let Go, were reprised versions of the songs on the album, and I loved them. It was like a special edition that you can only get by buying the DVD, and then if you want the other version, you have to buy the album. It was a clever way to sell both, if you ask me. I was disappointed the song Forever Diamonds in New Fashion wasn't included in the movie, but hey, I'm not going to complain because at least some songs appeared in the movie. You know, at least it was, some of the songs were tied into the movie in some way. And I liked the various feelings the music gave me, you know, whether on the road, on the catwalk, or ice skating. It was just kind of, I don't know, felt like catwalk music, you know, runway music. It was a pretty good feeling. I liked it. Very, very light and floaty and beautiful. You know, there were some other good songs in there too. And, you know, I want to also acknowledge or put this out there, but Roxy and Fiona appeared on the album, in the album. Roxy featured with Sasha in What's Up, and Fiona sang the song Kidz, which was the Spanish version of What's Up. So I'm like, why wasn't Roxy and Fiona in the line or in the film? I think it would have been interesting, because then, you know, Roxy been showing them boys, you know, she might give them a lesson and do a dance like it's her profession. You know what I'm saying? And I think Fiona would have been a good addition in general, because she actually was in the line. So no, Fiona was in the line and she was in the album. She just wasn't in the movie. I was like, okay. And Roxy wasn't in the line or the movie, but she was in the album. But she was a feature. So anyway, I ain't gonna be too much petty about that, but I would have liked them to make an appearance. Overall, it was a fun movie, full of suspense, thrill, action, adventure, and friendship. It's definitely not realistic for teenagers to drive a trailer truck across the USA, for all of y'all from other countries who think this is a thing, but it is all in good imaginary fun, so whatever. The movie was great, but I would have liked more from the Diamondz universe. Coming in at number 4 is Pampered Petz. This movie was released in 2010, the same year the Bratz returned during their first reboot after the court case fiasco in the year I turned 20. I'm often really surprised that this movie is rated so low by many fans, but then again, I'm not surprised because many Bratz fans think Bratz is about the magazine and the tweebles and whatnot. Whatever. But I felt this story had a lot of heart. It was a very heartwarming story, honestly. Written by Cindy McKay, the story follows the Bratz as they help one of their neighbors, an elderly woman named Dolores Lola Reyes, save her home and her animals. In the beginning, Jade is excited when she receives a call that a major spa wants her to set up a booth for homemade accessories at their location. She's excited to promote and sell her products. While sharing her excitement with her friends and inviting them to come with her, they hear a noise outside. Two men, who they learn is Mr. Grunion and his brother-in-law Joe Lackey, and a mischievous monkey, Jinxie, are running down the street causing a ruckus. When the Bratz Pack step in to help, they discover the monkey is holding a set of building plans. They coax the monkey into returning them, and then Chloe and Yasmin volunteers to take Jinxie home, while Sasha and Jade stay back to plan Jade's booth. Jinxie takes them to the home of their neighbor Dolores Lola Reyes, who has over 30 animals living with her that she rescued from the pound. She's not able to put them in the local pet shelter because it's filled to capacity, and she's running out of space in her home. She has no family, mentioning that her husband has passed away, and her daughter Celia, now an attorney, is estranged from the family. She's rescued these pets from the pound before they were being put down, and now they're her only family. Yasmin and Chloe volunteer to help her after returning from the spa, but the next day someone has called the police on Lola for having more animals than Stylesville allows in one home. The Bratz suspect it was Mr. Grunion and Mr. Joe Lackey, who they discover live next door and who've been acting suspiciously with Miss Lola. So the police give her 72 hours to find the animals' homes, or they will give her a citation or a ticket, okay, or a fine. She'll have to pay a fine. So she contacts Chloe and Yasmin, and they decide to stay behind from the spa trip to help her. Jade and Sasha decide to push onto the spa to set up her booth. The spa venture ends up being a total flop because they get so caught up in relaxing in a mud bath that they don't heed the warning from a hotel staff member to shower right after that. Running late, they leave the mud bath and head to set up the booth right in their bathrobes and stiff, muddy bodies, which turns everyone off. So they end up returning home to reunite with Yasmin and Chloe, who have also failed to find homes for Lola's animal friends because they were secretly being sabotaged by Mr. Grunion and Joe Lackey. So while trying to find homes for the animals, the Bratz Go's also learned that Dolores Lola Reyes was once a famous singer, a famous Latin singer, and had to put her daughter in boarding school because she didn't think road life was good for her. So they learned why her daughter was estranged from the family. At the same time, Mr. Grundy and Joe Lackey tried everything to get rid of Lola, including getting the police involved and having the landlord write her an eviction notice because having animals violates the term of her lease. So the Bratz definitely believe it's time to step in and help. So they try to reach out to Lola's daughter for help since she's an attorney and try to find out how they can reach her and get them reconnected somehow. And at first she's cold and dismissive. So Mr. Grunion then gets the news involved. Okay, so the Bratz Pack managed to turn one of Mr. Grunion's schemes around on him when he has the news reporters come to Lola's home, painting her as a crazy animal lady. Okay, so they announced that she's holding the Bratz turned it around by saying she's holding a benefit concert, a comeback benefit concert for a pet rescue effort. Angry about this, Mr. Grunion kidnaps the animals. When the Bratz discovered this, Chloe tries to reach out to Celia one more time, this time leaving behind a scrapbook of memories from her mother, Lola. The rest of the movie shows the animals outsmarting their captors and escaping wearing Jade's accessories, which also have been stolen by their captors because they broke into the house and stole the animals and hid the animals in good accessories. That's how they were able to steal them. So, wearing these accessories, the animals escape, outsmart their captors, and Jinxie the monkey is able to drive a bit. And using their instincts, they arrive at the show just in time. The Bratz and Lola put on an amazing show. Almost all the animals in Jay's accessories have found homes, but Lola still isn't able to get rid of them all, still violating her lease. Celia, who'd been moved by her mother's scrapbook, arrives just in time as the police were about to take or remove Lola from the house. She arrives announcing that she's bought the house and is the new landlord and plans on turning the house into an animal shelter. So she reunites with her mother and everyone else lives happily ever after except Mr. Grunion, who's left with his small pity patter house and nothing else. Okay, I even think Joe Lackey turns on him because Joe grows fond of the animals. So he adopts one of the animals too. So the end. I really love this story. No, it didn't have the romance or the action or whatever, but it was a very moving story about animal cruelty and family togetherness. When I thought of Lola, I thought of all of my own elderly family. Sometimes feeling that as young folks are too young to spend time with them. And I found it so moving that she rescued these animals from being killed in the pound. And I was moved by the compassion the Bratz Pack showed. But of course, Yasmin and Chloe are the only ones designed to have a heart, which burns me up, but whatever. I still love the story. Of course, it has unrealistic elements. Obviously, the monkey Jinxie was surprisingly advanced even for a monkey. Unless he was trained, how could he drive like that all the way to the show? Like, those animals would have crashed, period. But it was a comical little gag or whatever. And ultimately, I was happy the animals were able to save themselves and escape. You know, I love animals and heartwarming family stories, as I think everyone can relate to it. So I think that this story was very relatable and a very well-told story. I like that they were helping someone else out, someone elderly and in need. As far as the characters go, once again, Sasha is interpreted as lacking the most compassion and caring more about shallow things than all the others, and I can't stand that. But Sasha made up for it by standing beside Lola when they tried to make her look bad on live television. So she used her brains to turn that around real quick. Chloe's drama wasn't as exaggerated in this movie, which was good. She showed more kinder streaks, sweeter streaks, because she is very sweet. She's not just dramatic, but she was called Angel because she's sweet too.
And this was the perfect movie for Yasmin, the animal lover. It generally made her shine. So generally, I felt I received all the characters really well. You know, the personalities didn't interfere with the story, and they mostly all put others before themselves. When watching it again, I noticed how polished the animation was. The Bratz pack looked gorgeous in their outfits, and they wore several new outfits with some old pieces. Like, unfortunately, none of the outfits were really released on the dolls. Pampered Petz line didn't look anything like what was in the movie. Even some other Pampered Petz artwork that I found looked nothing like what's in the movie. They looked like prototypes or whatnot, but they didn't look like what they were trying to promote. Again, didn't seem connected to the Bratz doll universe like most of these movies, but this one, I kind of wish they had these outfits on actual dolls. I especially like Sasha's top, because I think it said EDM Festival. That's what her blue top said. It was, to me, a very cute top, and I would have liked to see that on an actual Sasha doll. So I think that the animation had improved a lot in this particular movie. And I like that different settings were used. A different house for Lola. A different resort for the spa. I mean, the outcropping, I think that's what they call it, the cliff dwelling. It did look like the cliffs that you would see in fashion Pixiez, but the spa itself, I think, was designed in its own unique way, and so they didn't seem like replastered or re-edited versions of other episodes or movies. And so it was pretty interesting. Saw some new sights, and I like that. I loved the Latin theme music, and I think the sound makes this movie a standout when it comes to sound. Okay, no other movie has inculcated Latin music that heavily, which always surprised me considering how popular, Spanish and Hispanic music is, or Latin American music is. Unfortunately, there were only 3 songs, but they made an impact and were quite catchy in my opinion. I loved Let's Celebrate. It was suspenseful, mesmerizing, and upbeat. It was a great time. So I love the music. Overall, the movie was heartwarming, interesting, and cute. The characters showed the most compassion towards the elderly Lola, making me like them a little more. Yes, the animals and villains were cheesy, but it made this a pretty fun experience. I would have liked the outfits from the Pampered Petz line to actually appear in the movie though. I wouldn't say this was like the most amazing movie ever, but I didn't have any problems with the movie either, as a Bratz fan. Coming in third place is Bratz Kidz Fairy Tales. This movie was released in 2008 when I was almost 18, getting ready to graduate from high school. Woo! A lot of people may be surprised that any Bratz fan ranks the Bratz Kidz movies higher than the movies with them as teens, okay? For me, I would think that the other Bratz movies would be as good as the Bratz Kidz movies, just in my opinion. But I just found the Bratz Kidz to be more enjoyable for me. And that's sad, considering it's really considered a spinoff. It's pretty sad. Written by Bart Jennett, who was back better than ever, Bratz Kidz Fairy Tales begins with the Bratz Kids trashing the fairy tale characters they are meant to portray. Rapunzel, Snow White, Little Red Riding Hood, and Cinderella in a school play to some kindergartners. Suddenly, a magical talking frog appears before them, telling them the keeper of Grimm fairy tale books heard them insulting the stories and will make them learn to walk a mile in the princess's shoes. If they can learn from the error of their ways, the frog can turn back to a prince. He whisks them away inside the Grimm fairy tale book they are holding, and they find themselves in the fairy tale land. Throughout the story, the girls have to find a way to finish the characters' stories. Alone, each of them discovers they are unsuccessful, and that it wasn't as easy as they thought it would be to escape and finish the story. These kids did ultimately find a way to change the story, showing they are smart and clever and brave, but they realized that they wouldn't have been as successful if it weren't for each other. And so they were able to interfere with each other's stories, basically. So they learned to respect the fairy tale books. After they finish their stories and return, the frog turns back into a prince, alright. He literally stays a frog with a crown appearing on his head, and then he disappears. Shortly after, their school principal, Mr. Grimm, appears, sounding just like the frog. we get an inkling that he was the real keeper of the tale. The Bratz kids put on a show expressing how much they opened their eyes and appreciate the stories now more than they ever did. I loved this story, and not just because I love fairy tales, especially Grimm fairy tales, but I love the message. So many fairy tales and Disney movies get ragged on for having princesses who are damsels in distress waiting for a man to save them instead of saving themselves. And while there should be conversations about how we portray women in the media, and there should be a balanced view of those portrayals, many times people fall into the trap of victim blaming, often missing the whole point of these stories and acting like they would have had a better outcome in those stories. Yes, Cinderella waited to marry a prince so she could escape her situation, but it makes sense for the time period. Women didn't have many options. She couldn't just leave the house. Then where would she go? Who would take her in? There weren't programs to help people back then. Women weren't protected by the law. Where would she go? People act like she could just get a job and become successful and whatnot. And while yes, those are inspiring stories and stories that make Cinderella overcome all odds and, you know, be independent and whatnot, they're not realistic, okay? They aren't realistic. And if most of us were in that situation, we would probably see our opportunity and leave the house the same way Cinderella did, okay? And some people are in that situation right now. There are a lot of people who live in those kinds of situations. But I mean, we don't have big bad wolves coming after us and things like that. But a lot of the Grimm fairy tales were symbolic of things that happen in real life. Because Little Red Riding Hood was written to warn kids not to speak to strangers, just to stay the path. Okay, and something like Cinderella was a story about, you know, real women who lived like that. A lot of women lived like that and longed to get out of their situation, and the only way out was to get married. Okay, and most of them hoped to marry a prince because that was all. If they were going to live a good life, that was all. That's the only way they could. So I think a lot of those stories were symbolic of things happening to real people. So I think nowadays we're having more conversations about how we address women. You know, this whole "I'm not like other women" thing is, to me, at worst, condescending. It's very condescending. You know, each woman is unique and different in their own way, and they have their own circumstances, and we shouldn't down women, any other woman, just because they're different from us. And so I really like that message. And I just love how these characters thought they were big and bad, and, you know, they got their behinds handed back to them. Okay? Look, I have no problem with people using their brains and strengths to get the job done, but don't look down on someone else who's doing it differently from you because you don't know the gag. Okay? You don't know what people are going through. So I love this story more now than ever because I really like Ever After High. So if Bratz and Ever After High, you know, weren't from such different worlds, it would have been nice to see the Grimms interact from the different universes. So it's likely they're all descendants of the original Grimm brothers, and so I kind of find this alternate universe connected somehow. So another thing I love about the story is that each Bratz girl gets their time to shine. Each girl has her moment to showcase her talent, abilities, and personality, and that's really the strength of both the Bratz Kids movies. The true shame of this movie is that there was never a Bratz Kids line based off of this. I believe they came out with the Bratz Forever Kids fairy tales line later, but it wasn't based off this movie in any way. I don't even know why they made this movie. Maybe a line was in the works but was scrapped. In any case, I would like to see the main Bratz in a fairy tale themed line in the future, if they ever get back to the point they are targeting adults, tweens, and teens, so they can make plain lines again. But I'll talk more about this a little later too. Okay, because I got to do a whole video for that one. Now, my only other criticism with this movie is I couldn't tell whether the fairy tale land they landed in took place in the past or in a futuristic version of the fairy tale land. Because the frog said it took place in an old century, but they had cell phones to call fairy godmothers, magic mirrors dressed like reporters, and street signs and tree trunks. So it seemed like Ever After High, a fairy tale world with a modern-ish twist, in my opinion. But okay, it's a book. It's a fairy tale. I really felt like each character showed themselves, their strengths and their weaknesses. Each character had to learn and grow, and I love evolutionary stories like this, ones with a lesson or a purpose. It was easy to follow and understand, and I think I took something away from it myself, from each of the characters' experiences and stories. So all of the movie only characters are memorable, especially because they all played a unique role in these timeless classic stories. After watching it a few weeks ago, I think I've watched it at least 3 more times after, because there was a lot that I wanted to grasp and understand. I would say a minor criticism of mine is the fairy tale land in this tale when it comes to visuals. I mean, I imagine the fairy tale land to be much more vast and beautiful, and I felt the shading was pretty dull in comparison to what I expected. I don't know why. I also wanted to know why Styles High was used as their elementary school, unless they go to a K-12 school, which is very rare in the USA. But I mean, not impossible. I saw some teenagers in the background, which confused me. I'm quite sure they didn't all skip grades. But other than that, it was refreshing to see a different world outside of Stylesville, and each scene suited the story they were telling, as I imagined they would. There weren't that many songs in the movie, which was pretty surprising. I wasn't mad, because that would be pretty stereotypical for a fairy tale movie, but it was surprising. That's just what it is. The songs they did have were really catchy. Round and Round was catchy. Are You Sure was like a slap in the face to those girls who thought it would be easy to be in someone else's shoes. And I've Opened My Eyes was a good musical number to express the girls' evolution and feelings about being more open-minded than they were before. And personally, the songs had purpose and they had meaning to the story. They weren't just stuffed in there. So the songs are kind of a staple of the movie. Overall, this was one of my favorite Bratz movies. I loved how the characters were portrayed, the overall message, and how easily the music taught the lessons as effectively as the story itself. I do wish they'd had an actual line for this, and I wish there was more clarity as to whether this was a modern world or a time period piece. I also would have liked a little more vibrancy in the scenes, but I'm really pulling stuff out of my behind because I know I like this movie a lot. Coming in second place is Bratz Kidz Sleepover Adventures, released in 2007. I was 17 that year and was starting my last year in high school. It was good this movie came out for Halloween because, man, it was spooky. In a good way. Written by Robert Schluter, the story focuses on Chloe, Yasmin, Sasha, Jade, and Megan, yes Megan, attending a slumber party held at Sasha's new friend Ginger's house. Ginger and her family just moved to an old house that was once abandoned, and she's never had a sleepover before. Their sleepover turns out to be fun, they eat and dance, and then time for spooky stories. At this point, Ginger becomes afraid, not just of the stories, but it seems she's also afraid of something else. Each Bratz girl begins telling her story. Chloe tells the story of a talking dog that tried to prevent her from getting her own puppy by ruining her life. Sasha tells the story of her being so in love with her own reflection that it came to life as her doppelganger and lived life like her. Megan told her story of being upset that she couldn't do what she wanted to do at the amusement park, wishing everyone to go away, and then finding at a magic show that her wish comes true, only for her to be left alone in a haunting, empty amusement park. Yasmin tells her story about selfishly buying an expensive bracelet instead of a birthday gift for her friend Dana, only for it to haunt her, following her, not allowing her to take it off. And Jade tells the story of her thinking an amusement park ride isn't scary and is for babies, only to find her friend shape-shifting into monsters during the ride. At the end of it all, the Bratz start hearing weird noises in the house. They ask Ginger to start her story, and she appears to be telling them about herself when she runs out of the room scared. As the Bratz pack follow her, they realize that the house has gotten cold, dusty, and old. As they open the doors to the house, they realize that everything is falling apart and dusty like no one lives there. Suddenly, doors start closing on them, and they realize the house is haunted. As they run out of the house, they pass a no trespassing sign that wasn't there before. Apparently, Ginger was a ghost. As the girls run through the streets to get to different houses for safety, they run into the creatures from their stories. They run into the talking dog that drove Chloe crazy. They run into Sasha's doppelganger. They run into the creepy clown from Megan's Funhouse horror. And they seem to run into Ginger at every house they try to run to. Eventually, they start shapeshifting into monsters. Not realizing it, they disappear into the strangeness of the night. This movie was super creepy and honestly scary and honestly intriguing. When I first watched it, I was 17 and it creeped me out. I still can't watch this at night because it gives me chills. And it's not that I believe it's real, it's just the principle. It's the principle. Like a doppelganger coming out of your mirror, being alone at an amusement park, being on a scary ride where your friends' eyes start glowing and they turn into monsters, having a charm bracelet follow you, and worst of all, having one of your new slumber party friends reveal themselves to be a ghost. If that wasn't a twist, I don't know what is. This movie is one of the most unforgettable movies in the Bratz franchise, and it sticks with me. I think somebody did a dissertation on YouTube about this movie, that like they did a breakdown, and it makes this movie even scarier. So I feel that it was well written, because if you could scare a teenager and almost give adults some heart attacks, I think that this is a good movie for all ages, and I would say it's well written. It had a goal in mind, and that's to give you a lighthearted scare. For a children's movie, it's not too shabby. And I mean, they would try to throw in some lighter hearted moments, like they try to make it seem like, oh, this is just a freaky night, you know, at the end, you know, making them turn into harmless shape-shifting monsters, and then adding, you know, lighthearted music. But overall, I'm still largely intrigued, and I still want to know more. I loved hearing each Bratz girl tell their own story. Again, the strength of the Bratz Kids movies is their individual storytelling, because each character is allowed a chance to take center stage and express themselves. Ultimately, we learn something about them. That brings me into the character development. Finally, we got Megan. In the actual Bratz Kids sleepover line, Megan was present, and I'm happy that they didn't set her aside just because another redheaded girl was going to be the Bratz Pack's friend. I was so happy to see her and to get a storyline about her. She's the 5th Bratz Pack member. She should be in there sometimes, probably more than Karen and Dylan. She was in the Bratz before they were. It made me sick that Roxy, Katya, and Sheridan got more screen time than she did. What's up with that? Anyway, I was happy about that. I was very happy. It's kind of what boosted this movie up for me. They even brought in Jade, though she wasn't even in the sleepover line. And I'm very glad they did, because she should have been in the sleepover line. I'm happy they finally interpreted Jade to be the daredevil she really is. She wasn't afraid of a baby ride. Y'all know Jade is supposed to be the daredevil. So why does it take a kid movie to bring out Jade's coolest streak? You know, they made Sasha self-centered again, but at least this time she learned her lesson. I was also surprised they even brought over Dana into the mix. Dana was not in the primary sleepover adventure line, but she was in the Bratz Kids sleepover super secret manicure bedroom playset, which is a detail I didn't think anyone caught. It was too bad Phoebe didn't make an appearance though, because she was in the Bratz Kids sleepover super secret lotion making bathroom playset, which seems connected to this line too, but Rock Angels ruined the possibility of her being included, because apparently the Bratz didn't meet Roxy until the benefit concert, meaning they couldn't have possibly met her twin sister either. So all those Bratz Kids lines Phoebe was in apparently largely went ignored in the Bratz series and movie universe. Whatever. So it was great to have Ginger too. I heard she was trademarked by MGM Entertainment and was supposed to be released too, but it never happened. It would have been interesting to have a ghost as a character. It was still nice to have her in the movie though. She was probably scrapped because she was interpreted as a ghost. It probably has a haunting backstory. And remember, this was before Monster High was even released and was even a thing. But it would have been nice to have her a part of the Bratz Pack. I want to point out that almost all the outfits from the sleepover line appeared, but they did seem to give Sasha one of Chloe's second outfits. Not sure why, but I do believe Sasha's outfits may have looked too much like the other pajamas, and I think they had to give Jade one to even include her in the movie, since she didn't have an outfit in the line. Don't know why they couldn't change Chloe's outfit instead, because I would have preferred the pink on Sasha, but it's all good though. I think Sasha and Chloe's outfits seem too similar. That's what happened. They both were wearing like the pink top and kind of greenish turquoise bottoms as their main outfit, but they could have put Sasha's secondary outfit on her. I don't know why they decided to change Sasha and not Chloe, but it's all good though. Most of all the outfits from the line were present, and I'm glad Jade was included. And aside from that, the other visuals, the dark and haunting visual, I think it didn't like have like the shiny visuals, but I think that's kind of what added to the grit and horror of this movie. It was like Gregory Horror Show. If any of you guys ever watched that CGI Japanese anime, this was kind of like Gregory Horror Show, where the kind of sharp graphics added to the haunting stage. So I kind of liked it. I liked the scene. I liked the visuals. The imagery really scared me. The music set the mood, that's for sure. Get Ready made the whole environment creepy. But Step 1 and Bratz Kids lightened the mood. So, and I think if they hadn't lightened the mood, this would end up being too scary for kids. It was scary enough for a teenager like me, let alone the little kids it was actually targeting. So I think that the music was perfect. It was just right and perfectly inculcated. It didn't need to have too many spooky songs. It just needed a few, and then it's a few lighthearted songs. But it definitely the songs set the mood. I'll put it that way. Overall, I fully enjoyed this movie. I could watch it over and over, especially looking for answers to the mysteries going on in this movie. I have concocted several theories about Ginger's family, and piecing it together is a chore, but I'm ambitious. I like that several key Brass Pack members finally got their moment to shine, and most of the outfits appeared in the film. Still wish the right girls were wearing the right outfits and that Phoebe could have appeared. However, it didn't take away from the movie at all. At least one of the playset characters appeared, and I felt that the stories were all really well told, really showcased each of the characters' personalities, and were really memorable as a result. Coming in first place is Bratz Desert Jewelz Genie Magic 2. This was released around New Year 2012. I was about to turn 22 years old. I can't even believe it. Some of y'all might be a little shocked that I ranked this higher than the original, especially because this movie came out way later. No, this movie didn't include the rushed Bratz magazine or anything like that, but it had a lot more going for itself than all the movies on this list, as far as I'm concerned. Written by the talented Cindy McKay, the movie opens by telling the story about the genie in the Temple of Aziz, or the Cave of Aziz. There's a lamp in the middle of a cave, and only those with a pure heart can obtain it. Once obtained, the person who has it has 3 wishes from a genie. After all wishes are granted, the genie returns to the lamp another 2,000 years. The story follows the Bratz as they head off to Morocco. Jade is a finalist in a designer contest and is set to put on a genie magic show at the Shala Museum. Katya has come along for the ride, bringing her father's old carpet that she thought lost its magic. She had been stretching the truth to her father, telling him she was putting it in a museum, when really she was going to allow Jade to use it in her show. While they're getting ready, a lone bandit catches sight of the carpet as she breaks into a museum to steal a ring and take it off to a cave in the middle of the desert. As soon as the show starts, the carpet is lifted into the air, the magic returning to it, and lifts the Bratz girls on the runway into the air and off towards the desert. When the girls arrive at their destination, they learn that a magic ring was connected to the carpet, and a girl named Alia retrieved both the carpet and the ring for her master Charlotte, an archaeologist. A shady archaeologist. Charlotte pretends to be nice, offering to take the carpet back to the museum for them, pretending he didn't make Alia do it. But when seeing Katya virtuously wanting to return the carpet herself, he believes she is the chosen one, the pure person who can help him with his plan. He tricks Katya into standing on the carpet and has the carpet fly off, nearly leaving his pupil Alia behind. The Bratz try to stop him, but they aren't able to stay on the carpet long enough. With the carpet gone, the Bratz end up stranded in the middle of the desert. Alia, Charlotte, and Katya meet an old woman who only allows them to eat and drink from her oasis in the middle of the desert if they trade her something. This woman seems kind of crazy. She reminds me of like Miss Fortune in the Bratz series. But anyway, she's not, I wouldn't say crazy, but she kind of is loopy, probably from the heat, and probably she's like a magical fortune telling creature. telling individual, I should say. So, eventually the Bratz girls find themselves here as well, and she provides 2 camels to them in exchange for Chloe's cell phone, which she seems to enjoy. So she warns them of the dangers in the sand, including cracked sand that can break and have them plunging to their deaths. As Katya's band travels across the desert, she is able to temporarily trick Charlotte into having her see the ring, only to take it off and fling it into the desert, causing the carpet to crash. With Alia watching her, she learns more about her. As Charlotte is trying to find this small ring in the middle of this sand, Alia stands watch. So while she's watching Katya, Katya learns her story. Alia is trying to use the ring and carpet to get to the genie's cave so she can wish to know about her parents who disappeared years ago. She tells Katya the story of how her father found an old goblet and gave it to her. They were from a very poor family, but her father helped her learn to appreciate the gift. And it was through the gift that she learned what was truly valuable. And one day, a man tries to exchange bread for the goblet, but Alia refuses, causing her parents to argue the night before because she kept the goblet instead of getting food for her poor family. The next day, her parents disappear, and Alia blames herself. After learning this, Katya hesitates. Eventually, Charlotte finds the ring. When he catches Alia looking at a picture of her parents, he sneers and tosses it off into the desert as a distraction. He then flies off on the carpet, with Katya leaving Alia alone in the desert. With Alia roaming the desert, she eventually runs into the other Bratz girls. Though she's apprehensive at first, she eventually agrees to travel with them for her own safety. They all learn to see each other in a different light through this journey. Eventually, they come to the cracked desert in the sand. As soon as they walk, it gives way, and most of the Bratz girls struggle to stay above the now drifting open canyons. Okay? Chloe and Yasmin end up on an isolated pillar in the middle of the desert, barely clinging on to life. While the Bratz are able to save Yasmin and barely Chloe, they aren't able to save one of the camels. Chloe had grown fond of the camel, so this causes her grief. Alia begins to realize how caring the girls are in comparison to her master, and she starts to soften. Even amidst all the drama and the grief that they've endured, they continue to push on to save Katya. Eventually, they end up at the cave where Katya and Charlotte have already entered. Using the ring as the key and the carpet as the door, it was able to magically open. Charlotte had been forcing Katya into the cave and was now trying to force her to pick up the magic lamp. Katya realizes that the magic lamp has her family name on it. When she demands to know of it, Charlotte realizes she's a descendant of the genie Aziz. He sees even more opportunity. At this time, the Bratz pack and Alia, barely getting past the traps and pits in the cave, finally arrive. Charlotte threatens to keep Katya's friends trapped with Katya in the cave if she doesn't lift the lamp. Katya agrees to do it, but she doesn't hand the lamp to him. She begins tossing it to her friends, and eventually the lamp ends up in Alia's hands. Tempted to know about her parents, instead of returning the lamp to the stand, she rubs it and makes her first wish. Katya's father, Sebastian, who'd been notified about the missing ring and carpet, who managed to contact the other Bratz girls about the dangers and was trying to fly to Morocco, suddenly starts disappearing. He reappears as the genie of Aziz. Katya is devastated because her father is now transparent, almost like a ghost. She begs Alia to stop. Alia proceeds with her wish. Alia learns that her parents were killed, which makes her overcome with grief. Then she asks the genie to tell her who did it. Sebastian grants her wish, and she learns Charlotte was responsible. Alia is pissed now, and she is ready to use her last wish to destroy Charlotte. But seeing Katya beg to say goodbye to her father one more time before he is imprisoned in the lamp for another 2,000 years, she is moved with compassion. Alia breaks and wishes to set Katya's father free. Charlotte gets mad with greed, knowing he survived by the tail of his little pinky finger, but he still gets mad with greed. He starts to try to remove the stand that held the lamp, which causes the cave to come crumbling down and caving in. The Bratz girls, Alia and Sebastian, all barely escape. Alia takes one last look at her master before the door closes in on him, trapping him permanently in the cave. We don't know whatever happened to him. Alia is happy that she escaped, but now feels utterly alone. At this moment, Katya and Sebastian accept Alia as a part of their family. The old woman, mysterious old woman, arrives with the camel, who they thought was dead. And apparently the camel is still alive, probably a magical camel. She gives them words of wisdom about being trapped by greed before she walks off into the sunset. The Bratz pack finished their runway show, this time with Sebastian playing the sax and Alia, who is now their new friend and a new member of Katya's family. This movie was amazing. It had me laughing. It had me crying. It had me on the edge of my seat. It had me move. It had me angry. I felt so many emotions. And I can't really say that about a lot of movies written for dolls. I think the American Girl movies were the only ones that did that for me. The story was very involved, from the setting in Morocco to the themes of abuse. I mean, who does Charlotte think he is? Having Alia call him master. Like, what is he teaching her? That she should call him master. And how he was grabbing Katya by her wrists and pushing her around. Pay attention, ladies. And then to moments of grief and lessons about continuing on after loss, to lessons on greed and learning to understand what is truly valuable in this world. This movie was just simply the best. It just wasn't as empty-headed as some of the other Bratz movies, and yet I think it's underrated because of when it came out and how it just didn't have the same format as the Bratz TV series, which most fans apparently love to death. However, I felt this movie had more heart than all of the movies I've listed before. And every time I watch this movie, I know I'm listening to a tale, a real tale. I already love magic and mystery. This was great. I love that they didn't try to throw in any random new Bratz Pack characters, and that Katya was treated like a member of the pack, which she was and should have always been. This was just an overall enjoyable film. While some things may have been unrealistic or even random, it was meant to be. In some ways, it made the story better, in my honest opinion. Everything could be explained away with magic. My only criticism is I was hoping to see more about Katya's mother, but I'm sure if it went that route, it wouldn't be about the Moroccan desert or her Genie lineage, if indeed she's interpreted as Russian, as her name suggests. I love the way the characters were interpreted. Finally, Sasha was not the selfish, arrogant diva she'd been in every other movie. When Alia was refusing to ride with the girls and Jay was adamant about leaving her in the desert, Sasha stepped in and said, "We can't leave her here." And she lets Alia ride with her. See, that's the layers I was hoping to see for the only black girl that represents all black girls in the Bratz movies. All of the characters learned something about themselves and others, and they grew. Chloe grew to love camels, which she initially hated. Jade learned to accept Alia, and Alia learned what real love was from the Bratz. Katya learned more about her family and her Genie heritage. She could have learned more, but the mystery around her makes her more alluring, I think. I really think she brought out the flirty turtle in this movie because she played the role when trying to escape Charlotte, ain't gonna lie. The outfits in this movie were just stunning. Okay, the backdrop of an ancient Moroccan city and desert just wrapped me in. I love destination themes, and you throw in some history and magic, I'm sold. Now, the outfits weren't anything like the actual dolls, and unfortunately they were better, way better than the actual dolls. The actual line didn't even have Sasha in it. She was never released. They have a prototype of her. She was never released, and I'm a bit mad about that. You know, these outfits look more like some Desert Jewelz artwork in the Bratz books than the actual official line. So they look more like prototypes, and I wish they'd been released. And it seems like it would have been two outfits because they're wearing pretty dresses during the ending credits too. So man, the animation definitely got sharper in my opinion, and I enjoyed watching it visually as well as for the story. I felt that it was a very enjoyable watch overall. And I simply loved the music. I loved it. Just like with Bratz Kids Fairy Tales, the music was carefully placed to get the viewers to think. Still Your Breath was a song preparing us for a future adventure. Think About It was in there to teach us to rewarp our minds when seeing people. And Time to Celebrate was a song celebrating the end, celebrating all they'd overcome and what they endured to become stronger individuals. I love the Arabic Genie sound the soundtrack had. and I wish it actually had an official soundtrack, but it was good for its purpose. The music was purposeful, and I think that's what makes it such a staple of Desert Jewelz in comparison to even Genie Magic's album. Overall, this is the best Bratz movie. And I know a lot of y'all gonna disagree, be like, oh my god, you don't know what you're talking about, and that's just not Bratz, or whatever y'all gonna say, but it gave me so many emotions. It took me in, and I was left thinking about life, my own life at the end of it. I wish the Dawn line was half as good as the movie was at that time. And I hope future movies are like this, but I doubt it. You know, somebody really just needs to bring all the Bratz universes together, because at this point, there's so many contradictions and inconsistencies. There really is no canon universe. So, but this is my favorite universe, the Desert Jewelz universe, and I really do hope that there's more evolutionary storytelling where the characters are shown to have layers. They can be funny and silly and goofy and things like that, but it's nice to have those characters with layers sometimes too. Anyways, I know this is a long video. I know that it has a lot going on, and I did not intend for it to be this long, because I've seen a lot of these type videos. I guess I just went too in depth into why I felt the way I did, but I will put in some timestamps so that you guys can these are basically reviews of each of the movies, so you guys be able to find the movie that you're interested in knowing how I feel about, and you can hop on to that movie and tell me what you think. Y'all can leave me a comment, get the discussion rolling, tell me what y'all think about what's your favorite and least favorite Bratz movies, and you know, keep it civil, because you know, we don't need anybody getting in no fights over no movies. But that's all I have for y'all until next time, until my next video, because I will be dissecting some other things going on in the Bratz universe. But until then, ciao, peace.